Chapter 607. Danger. Surrounded by danger, the old man didn't really care about Zhuowen. From his point of view, Zhuowen was merely a five-wheel ultimate emperor realm cultivator, even if he could crush him with a casual strike. Rumble. The huge palm tore through the void. The space overlapped, forming an endless palm imprint. Countless black holes formed, creating a terrifying spiral of qi. This palm was extremely terrifying, basically locking down all of Zhuowen's escape routes. What a terrifying person. A casual attack actually has such power. This person should be the ancestor of the Marquis of Baichuan, Su Ling Tian. Feeling the huge palm print pressing down, Zhuowen's face was extremely gloomy. This Su Ling Tian was indeed an existence that far surpassed Lu Nantian. Just this palm alone made him feel powerless. It really is Su Ling Tian. Su Ling Tian has actually stayed in the Marquis of Baichuan for nearly 100 years. It seems like he is really determined to seize the position of the county lord. Xian Yuanli frowned slightly, looking at Su Ling Tian with eyes full of fear. Su Ling Tian was already at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm 100 years ago. Now that 100 years had passed, Su Ling Tian had probably taken the last step to reach the Heavenly Venerable Realm. And once he reached the Heavenly Venerable Realm, he would be able to obtain the Central Imperial Capital's Azure Emperor's reward. It would probably be a small matter for him to replace the County Lord of Muqing County. Zhuowen is finished. Su Ling Tian's cultivation is too terrifying. This kit can't possibly block it. It's a pity that such a genius falls like this. Qin Nye shook his head, his voice full of regret. The master of the meteorite frowned slightly. She didn't expect that Su Ling Tian would directly attack Zhuowen the moment he came out, wanting to kill Zhuowen. Although she had a good impression of Zhuowen, she didn't think that Zhuowen could block Su Ling Tian's attack. Standing beside the master of the meteorite, Luo Xing's heart was beating extremely fast. A rare look of worry appeared on her pretty face. Looks like we have to go all out. We have to block this attack. Big Brother Hantian's spear intent can still be used once more. I hope this time it will be able to block this attack. Zhuowen's expression turned extremely grave as he watched the palm print shatter the void, shatter space, and reverse time. He wiped the tip of the spear with his right hand, causing blood to spill out. Instantly, the remaining spear intent within the bone spear completely erupted. Countless blue veins shot out from the surface of the bone spear, forming a blue spear shadow that was hundreds of feet long in the air. A terrifying intent realm exploded, containing an unconcealable murderous aura. The spear was the path of the Overlord. It was unrestrained and unrestrained. This terrifying blue spear shadow had pushed the spear intent to the extreme. It was as if it was the sole ruler of the world, and no one in the 9 heavens and 10 earths could rival it. This was spear intent, the concept of the spear. It was peerlessly overbearing yet unrestrained, and capable of looking down upon all mountains. The blue spear shadow, which was hundreds of feet long, shot out in the void, bringing with it countless blue spear prints. Layer upon layer, they accumulated in the surrounding space, almost forming a domain around it. It looked exceptionally terrifying. Rumble. At this moment, the huge palm print slammed down like a mountain, directly smashing onto the blue spear shadow. The blue spear shadow was awe-inspiring and fearless, and the terrifying spear intent exploded, transforming into the power of the domain, wanting to block this terrifying palm print. Rumble. The two merged in the void, and instantly, an extremely terrifying ring-shaped chi wave burst out. The surrounding space collapsed inch by inch, turning into fine powder. The air flowed upwards, forming a spectacular inverted waterfall, with countless black holes faintly appearing. Kacha! The terrifying explosion subsided, and the spear shadow and palm print were annihilated in the void. The two were actually evenly matched. Pucci! Although the palm print was offset by the spear shadow, the aftershock that was transmitted caused Zhuowen to involuntarily vomit blood. He retreated more than 10 steps, and a trace of horror appeared on his face. The difference in strength between him and Zhuowen was too great. Just the aftershock was enough to injure him. If not for Lu Hantian's spear intent, Zhuowen would have been annihilated into fine powder long ago. Spear intent? And it's the peak of spear intent. How old is this kid? How can he possess such a terrifying spear intent? Su Lingtian frowned slightly, and there was a trace of shock in his eyes. No wonder Su Chong said that the inner sect elder and supreme elder had died at the hands of this kid. This spear intent was too domineering. Perhaps even those below the ultimate 9 wheels emperor stage might not be able to block this terrifying spear intent. Ancestor, be careful. This kid relied on this spear intent to kill the inner sect elder and the 2 supreme elders, Su Chong said with a solemn expression. Humph. This spear intent is indeed terrifying, but it's a pity that it doesn't belong to this little demon himself. It should have been injected into his bone spear by some powerhouse. Just now, when he blocked this king's palm, I'm afraid that the remaining spear intent has already been exhausted. Su Lingtian snorted coldly. His cultivation level was extremely high, and he could see the truth of Zhuowen's spear intent at a glance. A sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. This kid seems to have a lot of secrets. When I capture him and interrogate him properly, I might be able to obtain some secrets from him. Su Lingtian chuckled and attacked again. Once again, a terrifying palm print descended from the sky. He was confident that Zhuowen definitely did not have the ability to block this attack. This time, he must capture this little bastard. Looking at the condensed palm print, Zhuowen's eyelids twitched, and the ominous feeling in his heart grew even stronger. Now that the spear intent in the bone spear had been completely exhausted, he had no means to block Su Lingtian's palm print. Big brother Hantian, how long are you going to watch this show? Hurry up and attack. After calming down a little, Zhuowen suddenly roared towards the sky. He knew that Lu Hantian was silently looking down from thousands of miles above. He did not believe that Lu Hantian would not attack at this juncture. Could it be that there is someone behind this kid? Zhuowen's voice was clear and loud, and everyone in the surroundings naturally heard it clearly. Su Lingtian also heard it, and his face twitched. He knew that the person behind Zhuowen was most likely an expert who had mastered this terrifying spear intent. And any expert who could master this spear intent was extremely difficult to deal with. So Su Lingtian was quite cautious at this moment. This kid must be killed first, or else he will be a disaster. Thinking of this, Su Lingtian's killing intent burst forth, and his right hand suddenly pressed down. The terrifying palm print in the void soared to the extreme, and instantly descended above Zhuowen's head. It only needed a breath's time to completely annihilate Zhuowen. At this moment, Zhuowen's heart was beating extremely fast. His entire body was wrapped in an aura of death. Facing the vast and terrifying palm print above him, he felt for the first time that death was so close to him. Old dog Su, you want to kill Zhuowen? I'm afraid you are not qualified. Just as the palm print was about to fall and annihilate Zhuowen, a wild and loud voice suddenly resounded in the whole world. Then, an unruly figure appeared in front of the palm print, and similarly struck out with his palm. The surrounding space was distorted and squeezed, and the terrifying palm print in the void was completely annihilated. The palm print was obliterated, and only now did everyone clearly see the mysterious figure that had appeared. This person's head and face were covered in dirt, his hair was disheveled, and his clothes were ragged, causing him to seem like a beggar. However, his eyes that emitted strands of bright light exposed that this person wasn't simple. Who is this person? He actually blocked Su Lingtian's attack so easily. The 3 magnates, master of the meteorite, Qin Nia, and Xianyuan Li, frowned slightly, and they were all puzzled about the identity of the old beggar in front of them. It should be known that Su Lingtian's strength was at least at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm. If this old beggar could easily block Su Lingtian's palm print, didn't it mean that this person's strength was not inferior to Su Lingtian's? Who are you? Su Lingtian's expression did not look too good. At the same time, he was shocked that this old beggar in front of him could break his palm print. This old beggar, who was dressed inelegantly, was not simple. Old dog Su, you are really forgetful. You don't even remember me. Open your dog eyes and look. I am your father Lu Hantian. In the void, Lu Hantian stared at Su Lingtian with a gloomy gaze, and his words were sharp and unruly. In the face of Lu Hantian calling him an old dog, even Su Lingtian felt a little embarrassed. Just as he was about to make a few sarcastic remarks, he heard that this person called himself Lu Hantian, and he was instantly stunned. At the same time, the other experts around the Marquis's mansion were also stunned. Lu Hantian was extremely famous in the prefecture. Even though he had fallen in the inheritance of the Blood Devil, many people still took delight in talking about him. In the end, it was because the Lu Hantian back then was too monstrous. Now this old beggar called himself Lu Hantian. Naturally, many people were stunned. Some even began to doubt their eyes. Why does Lu Hantian look like a beggar? Is he still that peerless genius? However, the aura on the old beggar's body was indeed terrifying. Although many people were skeptical of the old beggar's words, they did not dare to refute. After all, this was an expert at Su Lingtian's level. How dare you impersonate Lu Hantian? I think you are courting death. Su Lingtian's eyes flashed slightly. He snorted coldly and suddenly struck out with his right palm, wanting to crush the old beggar in front of him. Impersonate? Old dog Su, this lord still needs to impersonate you. Back then, you caused this lord to be trapped in the Blood Devil's territory. If it weren't for a coincidence, this lord would have very likely been alone in the Blood Devil's territory for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, the heavens didn't allow this lord to come out. Lu Hantian sneered. Hearing this, Su Lingtian's eyes narrowed. Back then, Lu Hantian was trapped in the inheritance of the Blood Devil's territory. However, not many people knew about this matter. Apart from the upper echelons of the 5 superpowers, no one else knew. However, this sloppy beggar before him was eloquent. This caused Su Lingtian to hesitate. He had never seen this person before, but he was able to speak of what happened back then. In particular, he could see a trace of familiarity in the old beggar's eyes. Could this person really be Lu Hantian? I really didn't think that even the Blood Devil's nest couldn't kill this guy. Su Lingtian's face darkened. If this person really was Lu Hantian, then this matter would be difficult to deal with. Lu Hantian's talent was extremely terrifying. Otherwise, he wouldn't have plotted against a junior back then. It was this Lu Hantian's talent that caused his heart to palpitate. Chapter 608. Death. So what if you're really Lu Hantian? Your talent is indeed strong, but in just a short 100 years, what level can your cultivation reach? I'm afraid that peak martial saint is already the limit. The corners of Su Lingtian's mouth curled up slightly as a cold smile appeared on his face. With a stomp of his foot, an aura that was like that of a primordial beast surged out, causing the surrounding space to collapse and distort inch by inch. His aura was like a rainbow, like that of an emperor. In 100 years, this old man has already taken the final step and reached the Empyrean realm. Haha, with my current strength, even the Qing Emperor will probably put me in an important position. When the time comes, I will destroy your house of Marquis Qin and replace it. I'm afraid the Qing Emperor won't care too much. At this point, Su Lingtian revealed a smug smile. He hadn't touched the house of Marquis Qin for nearly 100 years, because he knew the time wasn't right. Now that he had successfully advanced to the Celestial Venerable Realm, such a cultivation level could be considered a powerhouse, even in the Imperial City County. He would definitely be valued by the Azure Emperor. The Azure Emperor would probably not care too much about a mere county lord. Empyrean Realm? Su Lingtian has actually advanced to the Celestial Venerable Realm. No wonder he was so arrogant and threatened to destroy the house of Marquis Qin. Although Lu Hantian has returned, his strength shouldn't be too strong. It's already very impressive for him to be able to reach the peak of the utmost exalted realm. However, the difference between his cultivation and the current Su Lingtian is simply too great. Many people were surprised by the appearance of Lu Hantian, but when Su Lingtian revealed his cultivation of the Celestial Master Realm, they all shook their heads and sighed, thinking that the house of Marquis Qin was doomed. Hehe, a mere initial stage Empyrean also dares to be cocky in front of your father? Old dog Su, you're really promising. Who would have thought that Lu Hantian would sneer and also take a step forward? An aura that was even more terrifying than Su Lingtian's enveloped the entire world and crushed down. Instantly the world changed color. Lightning flashed, and dark clouds roiled like dragons. Su Lingtian's aura was actually completely suppressed by Lu Hantian's aura. Instantly, the smile on Su Lingtian's face froze and his face turned red. Thud thud thud. What was shocking was that Su Lingtian, who originally had an imposing aura, was actually forced back by Lu Hantian's aura. His face was extremely unsightly. You've also reached the Empyrean realm? Su Lingtian's face was filled with shock and anger. He discovered that his aura was completely powerless against Lu Hantian's aura. Clearly, Lu Hantian's cultivation was above his. Su Lingtian naturally knew how difficult it was to reach the Emperor realm. He didn't think that Lu Hantian had reached the Emperor realm, so he was certain that Lu Hantian was definitely above the Empyrean realm. He was probably at the late stage or peak of the Empyrean realm. When he thought that Lu Hantian's cultivation had surpassed his, Su Lingtian's face sank to the extreme. However, his heart was in turmoil. How did Lu Hantian's cultivation increase so quickly? In just 100 years, he had gone from the ultimate Emperor realm to the peak of the Empyrean realm. This speed was too fast. Hee. Old dog Su, you must be very surprised, right? Although the Blood Demon's land of inheritance is filled with danger, sometimes danger and reward go hand in hand. The energy inside the Blood Demon's land of inheritance is much denser than the outside world. Cultivating inside is simply twice the effort for half the result. Lu Hantian's words rang out again. His tone was full of ridicule, as if he was mocking Su Lingtian for doing a good thing. Su Lingtian's eyes were gloomy. Lu Hantian's words were not necessarily wrong. He said indifferently, "Misfortune and fortune really come hand in hand. Lu Hantian, it's not bad that you're able to reach the Empyrean realm. However, we're both Empyreans. Although your realm is higher than mine, you can't kill me. How about this? The two of us will each take a step back. Moreover, our house of Marquis Baichuan is also willing to compensate you accordingly. As long as you hand over that little bastard behind you, we'll pretend that this matter never happened. Let us prepare for the upcoming war of the 9 counties together. Moreover, if His Highness the Qing Emperor knows that our house of Marquis Qin has produced 2 Empyrean realm experts, I'm afraid that he will take special care of our Muqing County. This will be extremely beneficial to the development of Muqing County. What do you think?" Su Lingtian's eyes flickered. Suddenly, he became amiable, and his tone became much gentler, as if he was talking to an old friend whom he had not seen for many years. However, Zhuowen's face changed slightly. Su Lingtian was really thick-skinned. Just now, he had threatened to destroy the house of Marquis Qin. Now that he saw that Lu Hantian was also an Empyrean realm expert, his face changed faster than the weather. He really had no sense of shame. "Oh, you want me to hand over Zhuowen?" Lu Hantian said coldly with his arms crossed in front of his chest. The corners of his mouth curled up. "Haha, Brother Liu, you also know that this little bastard has killed many people of our house of Marquis Qin. As long as you hand over this little bastard, I can compensate your house of Marquis Qin for your losses. What do you think?" At this moment, Su Lingtian was quite enthusiastic. He even called Lu Hantian Brother Liu. Even Zhuowen was a little embarrassed by how thick-skinned he was. "Hand over your son of a bitch. Zhuowen is my brother. How can an old dog like you touch him? What else can an old dog like you do besides bullying the weak and fearing the strong? You're simply a disgrace to Muqing County." Lu Hantian cursed with his arms crossed. "You, Lu Hantian, don't go too far. It's better to leave a way out." Su Lingtian narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "What a noisy old dog. I've long found you an eyesore. Just die for me." Lu Hantian muttered and stepped out into the void. Suddenly his hair and clothes fluttered. He grabbed the void with his right hand, and grabbed a blood spear that was about 10 feet long in his hand. He directly rushed towards Su Lingtian without caring about elegance. "You asked for it." Su Lingtian's face was ugly. He stomped his feet, and suddenly, the monstrous sound of flowing water filled the surrounding space. Then, a sea of rivers flowed out from the depths of the void like a huge dragon. There were at least 100 rivers surrounding the area. The 100 rivers Marquis Residence's armor soul. All rivers into the sea. The power of Su Lingtian's soul armor was much more terrifying than Su Chang's. Not only were there nearly 100 rivers and seas, But each river was also much bigger than Su Chang's. Just in time. I want to see how powerful your all rivers into the sea is. Lu Hantian laughed. He twisted his right hand, and the blood spear started to spin. The surging spear intent was like an invisible force that spread out and exploded with a terrifying might. The countless clouds in the sky were swept away and turned into nothingness. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, hundreds of rivers surrounded Lu Hantian's tiny body like a giant dragon. But Lu Hantian was not afraid at all. The blood spear in his hand was like a cunning viper. Every time, it would attack from a tricky angle and break through the attacks of the surrounding rivers. For a time, the two of them were evenly matched in the sky. They were locked in a fierce battle. The aftermath of the battle spread out. The surrounding space collapsed and distorted, turning into countless black holes. Terrifying explosions rang out continuously in the sky. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Below the county, countless top powers were shocked as they looked at the terrifying battle that was taking place in the sky. This was a battle between two heavenly sovereigns. Every blow that was thrown out was extremely powerful, and it was not something that they could imagine. How terrifying! Worthy of being a battle between Empyrean realm powerhouses. Just the aftershocks that spread out actually gave me a kind of feeling of fear and trepidation. The master of the meteorite, Qin Ye and Xingyuan Li stood together and looked at the shocking battle in the void. Their faces were filled with shock. A battle between heavenly venerables was far beyond their understanding. Lu Nantian and Su Chang were also looking at the battle in the void nervously. They knew that the battle between Lu Hantian and Su Lingtian was very important. It would determine the survival of two super forces. They had to be cautious. Ancestor will not be defeated. Now, I have to deal with that little bastard Zhuowen first. He killed so many masters of my 100 River Marquis mansion, and even killed Tianliang. He must die. He must die. Taking advantage of the fact that Lu Nanshan's attention was focused on the battle in the void, Su Chang's eyes flashed, and he slowly descended. As he approached Arid Peace Palace, an endless might erupted from him. Jiang He, who was circling around him, was like a viper hunting its prey as he rushed out. Zhuowen Dai, no one can live peacefully after killing the people of my 100 River Marquis mansion. You are no exception. Su Chang shouted as he leaped up. Borrowing Jiang He's strength, he instantly arrived above Zhuowen's head. His right palm was like a mountain as he slammed it down. What? Su Chang, you despicable bastard. The moment Su Chang's aura erupted, Lu Nantian, who had been paying attention to the battle between Lu Hantian and Su Lingtian, was startled awake. Lu Nanshan's face was filled with shock and anger as he rushed towards Zhuowen. Unfortunately, it was too late. He was too far away from Su Chang. It would take him 5 breaths of time to rush over. In such a short time, Su Chang would be able to kill Zhuowen. Damn it! Even at this time, that old bastard Su Chang is still thinking about revenge. In the open space, Zhuowen's complexion changed. As he saw Su Chang's palm approach him, his heart couldn't help but race. Su Chang was in existence at the peak of the 9-wheel emperor realm. Moreover, by relying on the realization of all rivers to reach the sea, he could even contend with a martial artist of the Xuanzuan realm. Zhuowen wasn't a match for such an existence. The disparity between the two was far too great. No, I can't die. I definitely can't die. I still have a lot of things to do. How can I die here? Shrouded by the fear of death, Zhuowen panicked for the first time. He thought of the Zhuo family, Zhuo Xiangding's expectations, and even the promise he made to Mu Chenxue. Everything bound Zhuowen like chains, making it impossible for him to give up. Pfft! The terrifying palm arrived in an instant, and the terrifying might crushed down, causing Zhuowen to kneel on one knee. Blood flowed from his knee, and blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. Just the might alone was already so terrifying. If it had landed, Zhuowen would have definitely died. I don't want to die. Chapter 609. SS secretive in an instant. Su Chang's terrifying palm print blasted down amidst sighs. A trace of delight appeared in Su Chang's eyes. He knew that the detestable brat in front of him was definitely going to die. Boom! The moment the palm print descended, an ink-black fog suddenly surged. Then, Su Chang was shocked to discover that Zhuowen's body had unknowingly been enveloped by a thick ink-black fog. Crack. The ink-black fog was extremely terrifying. It was so viscous that it seemed solid. When the palm print blasted onto the ink-black fog, it instantly collapsed. What exactly was this fog? It actually broke my palm print directly? Su Chang's eyes widened. He looked at the collapsing palm print, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. He had used almost all of his strength in this attack. The attack of a 9-wheel emperor at the peak of the ultimate level was actually useless under this strange fog, as if it had entered a swamp. I'd like to see if this strange fog can stop my sea of all rivers. Su Chang's eyes were cold as he struck out with his palm. The waterfall-like river in the void scattered like a rainbow, and immediately blasted onto the ink-black fog below. Boom! There was an earth-shattering explosion. Then, Su Chang was pleasantly surprised to find that the ink-black fog had actually collapsed under Jiang He's attack. Roar! Be that as it may, in the instant that the shroud dispersed, a resounding dragon's roar resounded over the world, echoing endlessly over the horizon. Then, everyone realized in shock that the shroud that Jiang He had scattered was fusing and reassembling endlessly. Whoosh! There was the sound of something tearing through the air. A huge black dragon that was several thousand feet long suddenly emerged from the ink-black fog. Its teeth were cold, and its black scales were like a forest. On its huge dragon spine, 3 pairs of black dragon wings were spread out. It rode the wind and stood there. Boom! As soon as this black dragon appeared, an earth-shattering dragon might descended like a huge mountain. It instantly froze the entire world. The void distorted, and the earth cracked. The moment this terrifying black dragon appeared, time seemed to have stopped. Whether it was Lu Hantian and Su Lingtian, who were fighting in the void, or the countless powerful people who were watching from below, all of them could not help but focus their gazes on this black dragon. Dragon! Lu Hantian's eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. The black dragon's dark golden eyes were filled with frost and ruthlessness. It stared at Su Chang, who was not far away, causing a chill to run down his spine. This black dragon that had appeared out of nowhere actually made him feel a sense of fear. It was as if he was as insignificant as an ant in front of this dragon. Roar! The black dragon's roar. The dragon's roar. Dragons body. How terrifying. How did this black dragon appear? Could it be that Zhuowen? Su Chang's face was filled with shock. This terrifying black dragon had pounced on him as soon as it appeared. How could he not feel fear in his heart? After all, just the dragon's might alone was so terrifying. If they were to fight, it would be very dangerous. Endless rivers is endless rivers block it for me. Su Chang bellowed, and the huge river-armored soul in the void surrounded Su Chang like a waterfall, trying to block the mysterious black dragon. The black dragon's lips curled into a mocking smile. It instantly tore through the void and waved its huge dragon claws. Instantly, a powerful force tore through the void, and the river around Su Chang collapsed. Puke! Su Chang spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. His face was filled with horror. This black dragon was too terrifying. It was simply a massacre. After his armor soul had been materialized, it couldn't even withstand a single blow from the black dragon's claws. Swoosh! The dragon's claws tore through the void and pierced through Su Chang's body. Su Chang did not even let out a groan before he turned into a cloud of blood mist and disappeared. Roar! With Su Chang's death, the black dragon's eyes revealed a trace of exhaustion. It crumbled into countless black mist and entered Zhuowen's body. At this moment, Zhuowen was kneeling on the ground with one knee. He was extremely weak and had almost fainted. Su Chang was too strong. Zhuowen was no match for him. Just the power generated by the palm print had almost exhausted all of Zhuowen's strength. He had no strength to fight at all. If Zhuowen still had Lu Hantian's spear intent in his bone spear, he might not be in such a sorry state. Unfortunately, he had used up all of Lu Hantian's spear intent. Kid, I've used too much of my origin energy to materialize my dragon soul ahead of time. I'm afraid I'll have to fall into a deep slumber for a period of time. Take care of yourself in the future. Xiao Hei's weak voice suddenly rang out in his head. Materialization of the armored soul was something that could only be used by those at the 4th level. Zhuowen was only at the ultimate emperor realm right now. But Xiao Hei had not hesitated to exhaust her origin energy to materialize her armor ahead of time in order to save Zhuowen. This kind of injury would undoubtedly be one disaster after another. Xiao Hei! Xiao Hei! Zhuowen constantly called out Xiao Hei's name in his head. Unfortunately, there was no response. He knew that Xiao Hei had probably fallen into a deep slumber. I'm still too weak. I can't protect my friends and family. In the end, I still need Xiao Hei to exhaust her origin energy to save me. I'm still too weak. Zhuowen knelt on one knee and clenched his fists slightly. A trace of confusion appeared in his eyes. Then, his eyelids turned black and he fainted. After a series of battles, Zhuowen had already exhausted all his strength. It was actually quite impressive that he had been able to hold on until now. Whoosh! Lu Nantian instantly arrived. He looked at the unconscious young man on the ground and sighed softly. He said to the Zhuo family members who were still in a daze not far away, "Don't worry, Zhuowen has only fainted. Quickly come and carry him to the house of Marquis Qin." When Zhuo Xiangding and the others heard this, they immediately carried Zhuowen in a fluster and walked in the direction of the house of Marquis Qin. At this moment, none of the remaining warriors in the Marquis of Baichuan's mansion dared to stop the Zhuo family members. Zhuowen's performance just now was too terrifying. In their eyes, the high and mighty inner sect elder could not even withstand a single blow from this young man. Even an existence like the Supreme Elder had fallen at the hands of this young man. They originally thought that Su Chong would kill this young man, but in the end, Su Chong had fallen. At this moment, everyone's definition of Zhuowen in their hearts was that this person was simply a malefic star. They must not provoke him. Once provoked, there would be a bloody disaster. At this moment above the void, the battle between Lu Hantian and Su Lingtian had also come to an end. Although Su Lingtian was also a celestial master, it was a pity that he had just advanced to the celestial master realm and was only an initial stage celestial master. However, Lu Hantian was different. He was a peak celestial master and was only a step away from the imperial power realm. The difference in strength between the two of them was still considerable. Lu Hantian did not even need to use his armor soul to reify. He could easily suppress Su Lingtian single-handedly. "Break for me. Old dog Su, today is the day you die." Lu Hantian looked up to the sky and laughed heartily. He swung the blood spear in his hand. Suddenly, countless spear shadows filled the entire sky, as if the sky had been dyed red. In an instant, the hundreds of rivers around Su Lingtian were crushed into powder. Clang! A crisp sound rang out continuously. Then, the blood spear seemed to be shuttling through the void. A blood-red light flashed past and instantly arrived between Su Lingtian's eyebrows. A terrifying spear intent erupted, causing the speed of the blood spear to soar to the extreme. Su Lingtian's old face was filled with horror. However, this old man was extremely experienced in battle. He suddenly struck his palms to the side, and his entire body shifted a little. Then, the blood spear swept past his right arm. Poochie! Blood splattered as Su Lingtian's right arm flew off. It had been cut off by Lu Hantian. Lu Hantian, remember this, Su Lingtian won't let this go. Su Lingtian's resentful voice echoed between heaven and earth. Su Lingtian suddenly formed a seal and spat out a large mouthful of blood. Then, his speed seemed to have teleported as he disappeared into the horizon. Before Lu Hantian could even react, Su Lingtian had already disappeared. Blood escape? This old man has quite a few secret techniques. He even has a secret technique with such a huge side effect like the blood escape. However, so what if this old man escaped? After using the blood escape, this old man's cultivation will fall from the Empyrean realm. I'm afraid he won't be able to reach the Empyrean realm in the future. This person is nothing to fear. Lu Hantian's eyes flickered. He didn't put Su Lingtian in his eyes at all. The side effect of the blood escape was extremely huge. It was a secret technique that consumed the body's blood essence to achieve terrifying speed. A cultivator's blood essence was the essence of a cultivator and was extremely precious. Consuming a single drop would cause a great loss to one's vitality. This blood escape would consume more than a single drop. It would probably consume dozens of drops. Su Lingtian's cultivation would inevitably fall. Once one's cultivation fell, it would be extremely difficult to cultivate it back in the future. This was also why Lu Hantian didn't think Su Lingtian was anything to fear. After Su Lingtian escaped, Lu Hantian took a step forward and arrived beside Lu Nantian. He frowned and asked, "Nantian, where's Zhuowen?" Zhuowen consumed too much of his mind in the battle just now. In addition, Su Chong sneak-attacked Zhuowen at the end, so he fainted. He's now been sent to the house of Marquis Qin. Lu Nantian had a look of shame on his face. He was originally responsible for Su Chong, but because he was too engrossed in watching the battle between Lu Hantian and Su Lingtian, Su Chong took advantage of a gap and sneak-attacked Zhuowen. It's good that he's fine. Did you see that black dragon just now?" Lu Hantian nodded and suddenly asked Lu Nantian. There was an imperceptible light in his eyes. "I saw it. That black dragon seemed to have come out of Zhuowen's body. The way it appeared was similar to the materialization of an armor soul. As far as I know, only the inheritors of the Blue Dragon Hall can possess a dragon-shaped armor soul." Lu Nantian frowned. There was a trace of doubt on his face. A dragon-shaped armor soul was called a dragon soul. Dragons were a terrifying race that stood above all other creatures. They were blessed by the heavens. A cultivator who possessed a dragon soul would be stronger than other cultivators. They possessed extremely powerful and terrifying potential. Chapter 610. The fanatical gushing pitter-patter-patter. The rain was like a heavy piece of lead, rustling down and smearing the entire world with a layer of haze. It was as if the world had become completely silent at this moment, and only the sound of the rain outside the window could be heard. The battle between the house of Marquis Baichuan and the house of Marquis Qin had come to an end. The result was naturally a crushing defeat for the house of Marquis Baichuan. Not only were the elders of the house of Marquis Baichuan dead, but even the unfathomable Su Lingtian had lost his arm and fled under the deterrence of Lu Hantian. In just one night, the higher-ups of the house of Marquis Baichuan had either died or fled. The originally grand and powerful house of Marquis Baichuan had suddenly become too desolate. Lu Nantian did not kill them all. They had basically arranged for the elderly, women, and children of the house of Marquis Baichuan to leave the prefecture capital. Although Su Lingtian had caused the death of many of the house of Marquis Qin's geniuses, this was the decision of the higher-ups of the house of Marquis Qin. After all, this was the decision of the higher-ups of the house of Marquis Baichuan. It had nothing to do with the lower-level people of the house of Marquis Baichuan. Lu Nantian was not a bloodthirsty person, so naturally, he would not do such a heartless thing as eliminating the root of the problem. Moreover, he was confident that the house of Marquis Qin now had two venerable realm experts. Among them, his elder brother, Lu Hantian, was a peak heavenly venerable realm expert. Even if the remaining members of the house of Marquis Baichuan wanted to take revenge on them, it would be like throwing an egg against a rock. After the destruction of the house of Marquis Baichuan, the house of Marquis Qin naturally took over all the affairs of the house of Marquis Baichuan. Imperceptibly, the power of the house of Marquis Qin increased by several times, causing many other forces in the prefecture capital to be envious. In this battle at the Marquis of Baichuan's mansion, the most talked about event was undoubtedly Zhuowen and Lu Hantian. Zhuowen had slaughtered all the inner court elders, and the only two supreme elders in the Marquis of Baichuan's mansion. Such a brilliant battle achievement was enough to make many people feel that it was unattainable and even unbelievable. On the other hand, Lu Hantian was even more abnormal. With a single move, he severed the arm of Su Lingtian, the ancestor of the Marquis estate of Baichuan, forcing Su Lingtian to execute blood flight to flee for his life. Most of the credit for the destruction of the Baichuan Marquis mansion was due to Lu Hantian and Zhuowen. If it wasn't for these two, the Baichuan Marquis mansion wouldn't have been destroyed so easily. Through word of mouth, the names of Zhuowen and Lu Hantian shook the entire province. With the existence of Lu Hantian in the house of Marquis Qin, it was likely that no other forces would dare to provoke them. As he slowly woke up and listened to the sound of rain outside the window, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with a trace of confusion. After waking up, he kept calling out for Xiaohei in his mind, but he didn't get any response. Phew! Is she really in a deep sleep? After a moment of silence, Zhuowen suddenly sighed. He suddenly realized that he had lost Xiaohei's voice, and felt somewhat at a loss. Moreover, this time, he didn't know how long Xiaohei would be in a deep sleep. In the past, I relied too much on Xiaohei. It seems that from now on, I have to rely on my own abilities. Taking a deep breath, Zhuowen knew that he had to rely on himself while Xiaohei was in a deep sleep. Stretching his back, Zhuowen was just about to get up when a bright light flashed in his eyes. He suddenly leaped up, and an extremely powerful aura surged out of his body. I broke through. I actually broke through to the late stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage. It seems that the battle at the Marquis of Baichuan's residence prompted me to break through. Sensing the increase in aura in his body, Zhuowen revealed a trace of a smile. As expected, battle was the easiest way to break through. Zhuowen had benefited greatly from battling more than a dozen inner court elders at the Marquis of Baichuan's residence. Thus his breakthrough was naturally achieved. Creak! The soft sound of a door being pushed open slowly rang out. Then, the door to Zhuowen's side opened, and a silver-haired old man with a radiant face walked in. Grandfather! Zhuowen couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised when he saw the old man in front of him. Zhuowen, are your injuries better? Zhuo Xiangding looked at his grandson in satisfaction. His old face was filled with gratification and pride. Yes, much better. How long have I been unconscious? Is this the house of Marquis Qin? Also, how are the Zhuo family members? Zhuo Xiangding walked in front of Zhuowen and asked a series of questions. You've been unconscious for 3 days. This is indeed the house of Marquis Qin. As for the Zhuo family members, I've arranged for them to return to Rattan Armor City. Marquis Lu has agreed to turn Rattan Armor City into a super city. At this point, Zhuo Xiangding's eyes flashed with a trace of brilliance. Clearly, he was extremely excited when he thought about how their little Rattan Armor City could become a super city. Nodding his head, Zhuowen was also quite satisfied with Lu Nanshan's arrangements. He continued, Then how is Broken Rock City? Don't worry. Marquis Lu has also arranged for people to prepare to rebuild Broken Rock City. The 5 super cities that once attacked Broken Rock City have also been demoted to intermediate cities by Marquis Lu. A large amount of land and resources have been taken away from them. Zhuo Xiangding smiled. Hearing this, Zhuowen finally relaxed. Lu Nantian was indeed very thoughtful. Not only did he take care of Rattan Armor City, he even made arrangements for Broken Rock City. It seemed that he really owed Lu Nantian quite a big favor. That's right. This time, I came to your room because someone is looking for you. So, I came to tell you to go to the guest hall. Zhuo Xiangding suddenly changed the topic and said, Oh, someone is looking for me? Who is it? Zhuowen frowned and asked doubtfully, I don't know that person. He's a young man around 20 years old. He carries a large blade on his back and wears rough clothes. His strength is extremely terrifying. Moreover, Marquis Lu is also very polite to him. His background should not be low. Zhuo Xiangding shook his head. He carries a large blade on his back? Narrowing his eyes, Zhuowen quickly thought of a person. It was the terrifying young man who had comprehended blade essence that he had met on the way back to the county capital. That young man carried an extremely terrifying large blade on his back. Blade chi swept out with every movement he made. Yes, let's go and take a look. After pondering for a moment, Zhuowen still decided to go and take a look. In fact, he was extremely puzzled in his heart. He had never met the young man with a large blade. Why would he specially come to look for him? After passing through the winding path, the two of them quickly arrived at the guest hall. At this moment, there were 4 figures sitting in the guest hall. The person in the lead was the sloppily dressed Lu Hantian. Lu Hantian was somewhat one-track minded. After returning to the house of Marquis Qin, he did not tidy up his clothes. Instead, he still maintained the sloppy appearance of a beggar. This made Lu Nantian and the other senior members of the house of Marquis Qin feel extremely helpless. Sitting on either side of Lu Hantian were Lu Nantian and the white-clothed Lu Yitao. 3 days ago, when the House of Marquis Qin launched a campaign against the House of Marquis of Baichuan, Louis Tao did not appear. Zhuowen guessed that Louis Tao should be in closed-door training. In the center of the guest hall, a tall young man with a large blade on his back was sitting calmly with his legs crossed. What made Zhuowen's eyes slightly condensed was that Lu Nantian and Louis Tao were extremely polite to the young man with a large blade. They were even a little afraid. Even Lu Hantian restrained the arrogance on his face. Zhuowen saw the performance of the three people. Therefore, he found that the young man with the large blade was not simple. Zhuowen's entry immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the hall. Lu Hantian, Lu Nantian, and Louis Tao all nodded to Zhuowen. On the contrary, the young man with the large blade stood up and stared at Zhuowen with a fanatical gaze. Looking at the fanatical look in the young man's eyes, Zhuowen felt a chill all over his body. He felt a burst of nausea. This guy's gaze was too easy to make people misunderstand. Haha, you're called Zhuowen, right? You're finally here. You ran pretty fast that day. I haven't had my fill yet. Come. Let's go out and spar. The youth with the large saber laughed out loud. Hearing this, Zhuowen could not help but have a headache. Although he was not opposed to sparring, this young man with a large blade was like a sticky candy, sticking to him. It made him feel extremely helpless. Hehe. Zhuowen, his name is Guosheng. It seems that the two of you have known each other before. Lu Nantian quickly came over to smooth things over, and said with a smile. Louis Tao followed closely behind, and looked at Zhuowen with a complicated expression. He had naturally heard about the matter of the Marquis Baichuan mansion. Zhuowen had killed all the inner elders of the Marquis Baichuan mansion, and even beheaded 2 supreme elders. Zhuowen's actions could not only be described as sensational. When Louis Tao first heard the news, he was extremely skeptical and could not believe it. However, when Lu Nantian personally admitted it, Louis Tao had no choice but to accept this reality. Guosheng? Is he very famous? Zhuowen frowned slightly and said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly became quiet. Even the smile on Guosheng's face froze, and a trace of embarrassment appeared in his eyes. Haha, Zhuowen, your words are really ruthless. To tell you the truth, Guosheng is in the top 10 of the Green Emperor list, ranked 9th. He is a genius who has comprehended blade intent. Moreover, this kid's master is not simple. He is the personal disciple of the domineering blade Heavenly Venerable. He is an extremely famous genius in the imperial city. Lu Hantian laughed and came to the side of Zhuowen and Guosheng. He deliberately pointed out Guosheng's origin. 9th on the Green Emperor list, master of the domineering blade Heavenly Venerable. Hearing this, Zhuowen could not help but be shocked. The Green Emperor list was the most valuable genius list in the Qing Xian Empire, and those who could enter the top 10 were basically brilliant people. He really did not expect that this one-track-minded youth in front of him was actually the 9th existence on the Green Emperor list. Moreover, this person's master was the domineering blade Heavenly Venerable. Although Zhuowen did not know this domineering blade Heavenly Venerable, the title of Heavenly Venerable was basically a supreme expert in the Heavenly Venerable realm. Such an expert was an extremely terrifying existence in the Qing Xian Empire. When a cultivator's strength reached the 4th Venerable realm, they would basically have a title. The title corresponded to the cultivator's strength. Lu Nantian's title was Xianzun Muqin, and he was an expert in the Xuanzuan realm. As for Lu Hantian's title, Zhuowen did not know. After all, Lu Hantian broke through to the 4th Venerable realm in the Blood Devil Inheritance land. He probably did not give himself a resounding title. Senior Hantian, didn't you just agree to allow me to compare notes with Zhuowen? You also know that there are too few cultivators who can comprehend concepts, so my hands are itching. Seeing Lu Hantian arrive, Guosheng immediately withered. Lu Hantian's strength was not inferior to his master, the domineering blade Heavenly Venerable. Moreover, he was a terrifying expert who had comprehended spear intent, so Guosheng did not dare to be disrespectful. Yes, however, you need Zhuowen's agreement. If he does not agree, you can't force others to compete, right? Lu Hantian shook his head. Chapter 611. Reaching a higher level, Zhuwen raised his eyebrows. He could tell that Guosheng didn't have any ill intentions towards him. Guosheng merely wanted to learn from each other and improve. The reason why Guosheng chose Zhuwen was naturally because Zhuwen had also grasped a concept and formed a domineering spear intent. It was because of this that Guosheng valued him so much. Alright, let's learn from each other. After thinking about it, Zhuwen still agreed. He knew that Guosheng was also a cultivator who had grasped a concept. Perhaps he could comprehend something new from Guosheng's blade intent during the process of learning from each other. After all, his spear intent had only reached the elementary level. If he wanted to improve, he would need to learn from each other and practice on his own. How straightforward. Zhuwen, I like your personality. Come, let's go outside and learn from each other. Guosheng laughed loudly and leapt to the open space outside the hall. Zhuwen's lips curled up slightly as he followed Guosheng and stood opposite him. Lu Hantian and the other two also walked out of the hall and looked at the two people facing each other in the open space. This is just a spar. Don't get serious. Don't go overboard. Lu Hantian shook his sleeve and said indifferently. Guosheng and Zhuwen naturally nodded. Then they stared at each other. Guosheng laughed and said, Haha, Zhuwen, you're much weaker than me, so I won't use force to oppress you. I'll suppress my strength to the mid-stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage. How about we compete in concepts? Sure. However, you need to suppress your strength to the late stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage, because I just broke through. Zhuwen grinned and stomped his foot. The aura of the late stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage surged out. His clothes fluttered and his black hair danced wildly. He looked like a demon god descending from the sky. The late stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage? Lu Nantian and Lu Yitao's pupils shrank when they heard this. They still remembered that when Zhuwen broke out of the tower, he was only at the early stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage. It had only been half a month, but he was already at the late stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage. Lu Hantian wasn't surprised. He knew why Zhuwen's cultivation speed was so fast. It was because Zhuwen had the demon-suppressing green coffin. With the power of the blood demon within the coffin, his cultivation speed was naturally fast. Guosheng also looked at Zhuwen in surprise. He hadn't expected Zhuwen to break through in such a short amount of time. After muttering to himself that Zhuwen was a monster, he followed Zhuwen's instructions and suppressed his strength to the late stage of the Ultimate Emperor realm. Be careful, Zhuwen. Although it's a spar, I'll still use my full strength. As he spoke, Guosheng took a step forward. Boundless saber chi swept out like a hurricane with him as the center. Then, Guosheng took another step forward, bringing the saber chi with him as he instantly arrived above Zhuwen. Guosheng pressed down with his right palm, and countless streams of saber chi gathered to form a huge saber blade. Then he slashed down at Zhuwen. Zhuwen remained fearless, and with a shake of his right hand, profound spear insight erupted. Instantly, the surrounding space warped inch by inch. With him as the center, it was as if the surrounding space had frozen, and only his brilliant and ghastly spear light remained. Rumble! The spear light and the blade instantly clashed. Then, an extremely terrifying hurricane rose up and spread out in all directions. Crack! Zhuwen bent his knees slightly. The ground beneath his feet cracked open like a spider web, revealing the soft soil beneath. Guosheng didn't even draw his saber. Although Zhuwen's strength was pretty good, it was a pity that the spear intent that Zhuwen grasped was only at the elementary level. The difference in strength was too great. There was no need for Guosheng to draw his saber. Zhuwen also knew the reason why Guosheng didn't draw his saber. He snorted coldly. Two pairs of lightning wings spread out from his back. With a stomp of his foot, lightning covered the entire area. Zhuwen instantly retreated more than 10 meters, dodging Guosheng's blade chi. Rumble! The blade chi fell, smashing out a huge blade scar. Guosheng frowned slightly. He stomped his foot, and blade chi spread out from his body. His entire body was like a tyrannical blade as he rushed straight at Zhuwen. Zhuwen's expression turned grave. He spread out his lightning wings once again, turning into lightning and flashing behind Guosheng. His spear was like a venomous snake as it swept towards Guosheng's back. With the support of the spear intent, His speed soared to the extreme. Zhuowen, it's useless. Your spear intent is too weak. It's only at the elementary level. It can't break through my protective blade qi. Guosheng's voice slowly rang out. Ding! A crisp sound rang out. Just as Guosheng said, Zhuowen's bone spear was blocked by the berserk blade qi the moment it pierced Guosheng's back. It was unable to advance even an inch. Boom! The moment the bone spear was blocked, a blade qi swept over and instantly blasted toward Zhuowen's face. Zhuowen's face was shocked. He immediately used the Great Nirvana Sun to open 360 acupoints. His body flashed with a golden light as he raised his left hand to block the blade qi. Bang! As the blade qi approached, Zhuowen retreated in the void. His left hand trembled, and the web between his thumb and forefinger was numb. However, he had annihilated the blade qi. Your physical strength is not bad, but your spear intent is too weak. I originally thought that you would be a good opponent, but now it seems that you are too far away. Forget it, I'm not fighting anymore. The fanaticism in Guosheng's eyes gradually faded as he shook his head in disappointment. Back then, Zhuowen's performance in the Baichuan Marquis mansion was extremely stunning. Now that he thought about it, he also knew that the terrifying spear intent that Zhuowen displayed at that time should have been Lu Hantian. You're not fighting anymore? Seeing the disappointment on Guosheng's face, Zhuowen's brows tightly knitted together. However, there was a trace of anger in his heart. In the beginning, this Guosheng was pestering him to spar. Now that he felt that it was meaningless, he actually gave up. Zhuowen was not going to let that happen. You're the one who suggested the spar. Unless you can beat me until I can't stand up, don't even think about leaving. With a cold snort, Zhuowen stomped his foot and moved his spear. A blazing spear light rose as it swept towards Guosheng once again, faintly showing signs of going all out. This guy. Guosheng could not help but be startled. Then, the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of an interesting smile as he laughed. Since you're looking for a beating, then don't blame me. As he spoke, Guosheng also unceremoniously went up to meet him. Suddenly, the two of them engaged in a fierce battle. Countless saber lights and sword shadows constantly flickered in the air. Although Guosheng had suppressed his strength to the same level as Zhuowen, Guosheng's saber techniques were too skillful. Moreover, his saber intent had also reached a higher level. It was simply not something that Zhuowen could compare with. Therefore, Zhuowen was basically being beaten to death. Bang! 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 Time and time again, Zhuowen was beaten down from the air and fell to the ground. However, Zhuowen climbed up time and time again, and still fearlessly faced Guosheng with an appearance of a desperate man. Big brother, should we stop him? Lu Nantian somewhat hesitantly asked. However, Lu Hantian shook his head and said, only by experiencing the most bitter of hardships can one become a man above others. If Zhuowen wanted to progress further in his spear intent, he would have to put in enough effort and have an extraordinary level of perception. His perception is enough, but his effort is not enough. Hearing Lu Hantian's words, Lu Nantian did not say anything more. Instead, he looked at the figure that was basically being beaten up. Zhuowen's potential was limitless. In the Battle of the 9 Counties in a few months, there would definitely be a place for him. Therefore, he did not want anything to happen to Zhuowen. Boom! A golden light fell from the sky and fiercely hit the ground. It was the extremely embarrassed Zhuowen. Although at this moment, Zhuowen's figure was extremely embarrassed, the light in his eyes was getting brighter and brighter. Roaming dragon throws heaven and earth breaks. Lone spear 9 link countries despairs. Ruthless 100 world weapons. Lung Ning's origin pits 10,000 people. While reciting the poem that he had read in Lu Hantian's cave, Zhuowen slowly closed his eyes. A mysterious aura slowly spread out from his body and directly formed a terrifying whirlwind. This kid has entered the profound comprehending realm. I'm afraid that when he wakes up, he will be able to completely grasp the next level of spear intent. Looking at Zhuowen, who was wrapped in a mysterious aura, Lu Hantian could not help but laugh out loud. It was as if he had entered the profound comprehending realm himself. He entered the profound comprehending realm? This Zhuowen's perception is so terrifying? In midair, Guosheng softly exclaimed and instantly landed on the ground. He looked at Zhuowen, who was not far away with his eyes tightly closed, and a strange expression appeared on his face. What a freak! After being beaten up, he can still comprehend something and enter the profound comprehending realm. Guosheng sighed as he shook his head. Zhuowen's talent was comparable to the monstrous geniuses in the imperial city. Senior Han Tian, I'll take my leave first. My master has urged me to hurry back and prepare for the Battle of the 9 Counties. When Zhuowen wakes up, please send my regards. Guosheng cupped his hands at Lu Hantian and the others. With a wave of his sleeve, countless saber chi surrounded him. His entire body turned into a sharp saber chi and swept towards the distant horizon. In an instant he disappeared. This Guosheng is definitely a genius. This Battle of the 9 Counties will reshuffle the Green Emperor leaderboard. This Guosheng will definitely be able to enter the top 5 of the Green Emperor leaderboard. He has mastered the next level of saber intent. This kid is absolutely terrifying. Watching Guosheng disappear into the horizon, Lu Hantian could not help but mutter to himself. Beside him, Lu Nantian and Lve Tao nodded in agreement. Guosheng was indeed extremely terrifying. Guosheng's cultivation had already reached the peak of the ultimate emperor realm. With his terrifying blade intent, he was already invincible among his peers. Guosheng had even defeated many ultimate emperor realm ancient martial art practitioners in the past. He was definitely a terrifying genius. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. In the courtyard, Zhuowen had been in the profound comprehending realm for 3 days. However, when the sun set on the 3rd day, a terrifying aura surged out. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes, and his face was filled with excitement. The 3 days in the profound comprehending realm were equivalent to 3 months of bitter cultivation. Not only had he mastered the next level of spear intent, but his cultivation had also naturally reached the peak of the ultimate emperor realm. He was only half a step away from the ultimate emperor realm. Where's Guosheng? Looking around, Zhuowen did not see Guosheng. This time, he was able to enter the profound comprehending realm, mainly because of Guosheng. Guosheng has already left Muqing County. His master, Lord Tyrant Blade, summoned him back to prepare for the Battle of the 9 Counties in 4 months. Before he left, he asked us to send his regards to you. We'll meet again in the imperial capital, Lu Hantian said with a smile. Chapter 612. A marriage contract. There were only 4 months left until the Battle of the 9 Counties. The atmosphere in the prefecture capital had become much more solemn. Everyone knew that the Battle of the 9 Counties was related to the honor of Muqing Prefecture. It was also a way to display Muqing Prefecture's strength. Zhuowen didn't stay at the house of Marquis Qin for too long. He only stayed for 3 days before setting off for Rattan Armor City, with the bronze paper kite as his mount. Although Rattan Armor City was far away, it was nothing for Zhuowen. He could reach it in a few days. A green shadow flashed by and Zhuowen stopped in the sky above Rattan Armor City. Looking down at the city under construction, Zhuowen smiled. He knew that Lu Nantian was indeed preparing to turn Rattan Armor City into a super city. He could even feel many powerful warriors below. These warriors were probably transferred from the house of Marquis Qin by the Lu Nantian. Their purpose was to speed up the construction of Rattan Armor City. What surprised Zhuowen was that there was a huge statue erected at the gate of Rattan Armor City. The statue was in the image of himself. Looks like I've become famous too. Shaking his head and laughing, Zhuowen patted the green bird under him. With a loud cry, the green bird circled in the sky and slowly landed in Rattan Armor City. At this moment, many people in Rattan Armor City noticed the green bird that landed. The young man on the back of the green bird gave them a sense of familiarity. After landing, Zhuowen put away the bronze paper kite and directly flew towards the Zhuo family. He instantly disappeared from everyone's sight. That young man looks so familiar. I think I've seen him somewhere before. The warriors who were originally scattered around building the city all looked at the young man's disappearing figure in confusion. They felt that the young man looked very familiar. Look, isn't that young man's face very similar to the statue outside the city gate? Could that person be the legendary Zhuowen? No one knew who it was, But someone pointed at the statue outside the city gate and spoke with an excited expression. Immediately, it attracted the gazes of many people to the statue. Sure enough, they discovered that the young man's face was 90% similar to the statue's. The statue looked a little younger, and the young man was a little more mature. However, their faces were the same. Yes, that person must be Zhuowen. After recognizing Zhuowen, quite a few cultivators in the surroundings were in an uproar. Their faces were filled with reverence. Zhuowen's deeds had not only spread in the provincial capital, but had basically spread to the entire Muqin province. Zhuowen was a genius who rose from nothing and grew step by step, defeating countless geniuses in Muqin County. Even the destruction of Baichuan Marquis Mansion was inseparable from Zhuowen. It could be said that Zhuowen's deeds were filled with miracles and brilliance. With so many sensational deeds, Zhuowen was like a legend in the hearts of all the ancient martial art practitioners in Muqin County. Many ancient martial art practitioners saw Zhuowen as a role model. The ancient martial art practitioners of Vine Armor City were even more fanatical about Zhuowen. Many of them were even proud to be citizens of Vine Armor City. Zhuowen naturally did not know his current status and weight among the other warriors. Even if he knew, he would not be excited or happy because of this. He was very clear that the law of this continent was that the strong were respected, and the weak were prey to the strong. This was the only law since ancient times. Zhuowen's current achievements did not fall from the sky out of thin air. He had exchanged his life for them time and time again. Although there were opportunities without a strong will and hard work, even if the opportunities were in front of you, you might not be able to obtain them. Experts were never made overnight. Instead, they had to walk through endless bitterness and tears. Zhuowen himself was very clear about this principle, so he had never felt proud or complacent. Instead, it was a matter of course, because this was the result of one's hard work. Furthermore, Zhuowen's goal was not just to become a powerhouse. He needed to become even stronger. He needed to be strong enough to cover the sky with one hand, strong enough to shatter galaxies, strong enough to be indestructible. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Zhuowen's goal was an unreachable dream. But Zhuowen knew that what he needed was not the result, but the process. He needed to set an unreachable dream for himself. Otherwise, if he did not even have a dream, he would become lost and at a loss. After returning to the family, Zhuowen handed over the majority of the resources he had obtained from the Blood Devil inheritance to Zhuo Xiangding. He knew that if the family wanted to rise, resources were very important. The resources he had obtained from the Blood Devil inheritance were comparable to half of the foundation of a superpower. Zhuowen knew that with these resources, it would only take 10 years for the Zhuo family to develop to an unprecedented level. Although it would not be comparable to a superpower, it would not be a problem for the family to surpass the majority of the super cities. When Zhuowen took out a terrifying amount of resources, Zhuo Xiangding was stunned. Soon after, his face lit up with ecstasy. These resources were extremely important to the Zhuo family. Currently, there were many talented seedlings among the Zhuo family's younger generation. If they wanted to nurture these seedlings into elites, they would undoubtedly need a huge amount of resources. The resources Zhuowen had given them were more than enough for the Zhuo family to develop into a large family. After handing over the resources in his hands to Zhuo Xiangding, Zhuowen wanted to return to the Veiled Dragon Pavilion and enter seclusion. However, Zhuo Xiangding stopped him. "Grandfather, is there anything else?" Zhuowen could not help but ask when he saw Zhuo Xiangding's hesitant expression. "Come with me first. I want to show you something." Zhuo Xiangding seemed to have made up his mind. He suddenly pulled Zhuowen into the inner room. Then, Zhuowen saw Zhuo Xiangding rummaging through the inner study, as if he was looking for something. "Found it," Zhuo Xiangding said in pleasant surprise. Soon after, he took out a somewhat shabby brocade box from the corner of the bookshelf. The surface of the brocade box was even covered in cobwebs. It seemed to be from a long time ago. "Grandfather, this is..." Zhuowen asked in confusion. Zhuo Xiangding handed the brocade box to Zhuowen and said with a smile, "You'll know when you open it. This old man originally thought that you would never use this. However, Your talent and performance have surprised even your grandfather. You should be able to use this thing. With a puzzled expression, Zhuowen finally opened the brocade box. Inside the brocade box was a palm-sized scroll. It looked extremely small. The surface of the scroll was slightly yellowed, which was a sign of time. Zhuowen took the scroll and unfolded it. It was filled with dense black handwriting, and each handwriting was only the size of a thumb. Zhuowen browsed line by line, and his expression became increasingly strange. After reading, Zhuowen's gaze fell on Zhuo Xiangding and said, "Grandfather, this is a marriage contract." "Haha, that's right, this is indeed a marriage contract. Moreover, the one you are engaged to is the daughter of the Grand Family, one of the 5 great families of the Imperial City. She is Grand Lily." At this point, Zhuo Xiangding's voice trembled slightly. Grand Family? There were a total of 7 extremely powerful forces in the Imperial City. Other than the Imperial Family, and the Imperial City's Blue Dragon Hall Branch Palace, there were also 5 great families scattered in the 5 major areas of the Imperial City. These 5 great families were extremely powerful, and each of them had a strong foundation. Even the House of Marquis Qin, the number 1 force in Wuxia County, might not necessarily have a stronger foundation than these 5 great families. After all, the Imperial City was the head of the 9 counties. The size of the county far exceeded the other 8 counties. These 5 great families were the top forces of the Imperial City. They controlled a part of the Imperial City's lifeline, and their foundation was even more terrifying than the average county lord. As one of the 5 great families, the Grand Family's foundation was naturally terrifying. Zhuowen had also heard of Grand Lily before. She was the proud daughter of the Grand Family. Her talent was extremely powerful, and it was said that she was one of the top 10 existences on the Green Emperor leaderboard. Her strength was unfathomable. He did not expect that he would actually have a marriage contract with such a proud daughter of the Grand Family. This was somewhat unrealistic. The Grand Family was high and mighty, and was one of the 5 great families of the Imperial City. On the other hand, the Zhuo family was merely an insignificant small family in a low-level city. One was in the sky, and the other was in the ground. How did this marriage contract come about? As if seeing Zhuowen's doubts, Zhuo Xiangding shook his head and said, "It's a long story. Zhuowen, 20 years ago, there were actually no 5 great families in the Imperial City. There were only 4 great families. The Grand Family rose to prominence in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, the Grand Family was just like us, a small family in Rattan Armor City. Back then, the Grand Family and our Zhuo family were family friends, so our relationship was extremely good. Later on, a peerless genius appeared in the Grand Family. His name was Grand Haohai, and he is the current head of the Grand Family. This person's talent was extremely terrifying. Back then, he and your father, Zhuo Xiaotian, became the Rattan Armor duo. The 2 of them were about the same age, had terrifying talent, and had similar cultivation levels. Therefore, the 2 of them were close friends. 20 years ago, Grand Haohai's daughter was born. At that time, you were not yet born. You were born a year later. Back then, Grand Haohai and Xiaotian joked that if Xiaotian's descendant was a boy, then they would set a child marriage. This marriage contract was signed at that time. Hearing this, Zhuowen was slightly speechless. This marriage contract was really a bit of a joke. At that time, he was not yet born. If it had dragged on for a few years, wouldn't he have had to marry a woman who was a few years older than him? Later on, Grand Duke Hauran didn't want the Grand Duke family to fade into obscurity, so he resolutely moved the Grand Duke family to the imperial capital county. Xiaotian and Grand Duke Hauran had a deep relationship, so he also helped the Grand Duke family move. After that, the Grand family settled down in the imperial city, while Grand Hauran and Xiaotian went to the imperial city to work hard. They wanted to make a name for themselves there. A year later, Xiaotian returned from the imperial city with a baby in his arms. That baby was you. After he handed the baby to me, he left the Grand family again without saying a word. It was because of this departure that all news of Xiaotian disappeared, like a clay ox entering the sea. After Xiaotian disappeared, the Grand family rose rapidly in the imperial capital county. The speed of their rise was so fast that it almost reached a shocking level. In a short 20 years, the Grand family went from a small unknown family to one of the 5 great families. And this marriage contract of yours only lasted for 20 years. In these 20 years, the Grand family did not mention the marriage contract, nor did they return to Vine Armor City. I'm afraid they have long forgotten about this small city. At this point, Zhuo Xiangding said hesitantly, "Back then, I did not take out this marriage contract because our Zhuo family was too insignificant to the Grand family. However, Zhuowen, you are different. Your talent is even greater than your father's. If a genius like you brought this marriage contract to the Grand family, you would definitely be accepted by the Grand family, and even be put in an important position." Chapter 613. The nirvana of the great sun had passed away. Zhuowen's brows furrowed slightly. He had not expected that there would be such a secret in this marriage contract. Moreover, the Glan family, one of the 5 great families of the imperial capital, which was at the peak of its power, had once been a small, nameless family in Rattan Armor City. Back then, I was brought back by my father? Then my father did not say where he was going? Zhuowen felt that there was something fishy about this. Whether it was his father's disappearance or the rise of the Glan family, he had a feeling that perhaps the head of the Glan family, Glan Haohai, knew some clues about his father's disappearance. Moreover, the speed at which the Grant family had risen was somewhat unimaginable. In a short 20 years, they had grown from a small family in a low-level city to one of the 5 great families of the imperial capital. Their foundation had even surpassed the Muqin Marquis mansion. This kind of rise speed was extremely abnormal in Zhuo Wen's opinion. Back then, after your father handed you over to me, he left immediately. He did not leave any message. However, at that time, I could see the sadness and exhaustion in his eyes. I did not know what he had experienced back then, and could not stop him. Zhuo Xiangding shook his head. Then, who is my mother? Suddenly, Zhuowen's body trembled. Although he had not seen his parents since he was young, he knew that his father's name was Zhuo Xiaotian. However, he did not even know his mother's name. This was the pain that Zhuowen had hidden in his heart. Since he was young, he had no parents and was bullied because of his lack of talent. This grievance had always been hidden in the depths of Zhuowen's heart. Even if the real Zhuowen had been replaced by another soul, this grievance had always existed and suppressed the emotions in Zhuowen's heart. I'm sorry, Zhuowen, I really do not know your mother. Back then, your father did not reveal any information. Perhaps only your father can answer this question. Zhuo Xiangding shook his head and smiled bitterly. Hearing this, Zhuowen's heart was bitter. As a son, he did not even know his mother's name. He did not even know what his mother looked like. One could imagine how low Zhuowen's heart was at this moment. If you want to know your background, then you have to find your father. Back then, your father went to the imperial capital with Grant Haohai. Perhaps you might be able to find some clues when you go to the imperial capital during the War of the 9 Counties. At this point, Zhuo Xiangding's eyes shone brightly. As Zhuo Xiaoqian's father, Zhuo Xiangding naturally hoped to find his son. Unfortunately, Zhuo Xiangding's strength was too low. He did not even have the qualifications to enter the imperial capital, so there had been no news of Zhuo Xiaotian for many years. Grandpa, don't worry. On this trip to the imperial city, I will definitely investigate my father's whereabouts. Zhuowen nodded and said seriously, yes, just accept this marriage contract. If you go to the imperial capital, you can go to the Grant family first. With your talent and this marriage contract, I'm afraid Grant Haohai will put you in an important position. Zhuo Xiangding suddenly said with a smile. Zhuowen shrugged helplessly. He had never seen Grant Haohai before. Moreover, as the proud daughter of the Grant family, it was unlikely that she would give herself to a disciple of a small family like him. Therefore, Zhuowen did not have much hope for this marriage contract. Moreover, in the depths of his heart, Zhuowen was even somewhat against this marriage contract. After all, his heart was already filled with Mu Qinxue. How could there be room for another woman in his eyes? Yes, when the time comes, I will go to the Grant family. However, it will not be because of the marriage contract, but because of my father. Looking at the gratified expression on Zhuo Xiangding's face, Zhuowen secretly decided that since Grant Haohai was his father's best friend, then he must know some secrets about his father's disappearance. Therefore, Grant Haohai was an extremely important person to find Zhuo Xiaotian. The Battle of the 9 Counties is only about 4 months away. Grandpa will not disturb you anymore. Go back and cultivate well. Zhuo Xiangding slightly nodded and said to Zhuowen with a smile. Zhuowen bowed, and then left the hall, returning to the Zhuo family's Veiled Dragon Pavilion. More than 2 years had passed, but the Veiled Dragon Pavilion had not changed much. The decorations inside were almost the same as before. Moreover, it looked extremely clean. Obviously, there were people taking care of it regularly. Young Master? You are young Master Zhuowen. You are finally back. This old servant pays his respects to young Master. An excited voice came from the depths of the courtyard. Soon after, an old man with white hair hurriedly came in front of Zhuowen and respectfully bowed. His wrinkled face was filled with excitement. Lu Tao. Looking at the old man with white hair in front of him, Zhuowen's eyes could not help but reveal a trace of reminiscence. The old man in front of him was the housekeeper of the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, Lu Tao. When Zhuowen first became the pavilion master of the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, Lu Tao had been following him wholeheartedly. He was personally promoted by Zhuowen. I really didn't expect it. I haven't been back for more than 2 years, but you are still taking care of the Veiled Dragon Pavilion every day. Lu Tao, you have worked hard. Looking at the familiar decorations around the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, Zhuowen knew that even though he had not been in the family for 2 years, Lu Tao had done his utmost to take care of this empty pavilion. Hearing these words, Lu Tao immediately trembled with excitement. Zhuowen's great name had practically spread throughout the entire Muqing County. Lu Tao clearly knew just how frightening of a monstrous genius this seemingly ordinary young man before him was. Being praised by Zhuowen, Lu Tao was indescribably excited. He immediately said, I am the housekeeper of the Veiled Dragon Pavilion. It is my duty to take care of the affairs of the pavilion for you. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Lu Tao's loyalty made Zhuowen quite emotional. His eyes flickered, and he took out a cold 6-leaf grass from the spiritual ring. He said, This is a 3rd-grade spiritual medicine, 6-leaf mysterious grass. The coldine force inside is enough to help you advance to the Yin Void realm. Lu Tao's talent was very ordinary. After more than half of his life, he was still at the peak of the Nirvana realm. Although he was only 1 step away from the Yin Void realm, he was too old, and his potential had been exhausted. It was basically impossible to take this step without the help of medicine. Seeing Lu Tao's loyalty and devotion to the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, Zhuowen naturally wanted to secretly help him. Lu Tao was a little hesitant. A 3rd-rank spirit herb was too precious for him. Even the genius disciples of his family might not be able to obtain such a spirit herb. He was just an insignificant servant. How could he obtain such a spirit herb? Take it. I'm the pavilion master of the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, and you're the steward. This is what you deserve. With a flick of his finger, the 6-leaf mysterious grass turned into a stream of light and lay quietly in Lu Tao's palm. Then, Zhuowen slowly entered the Hidden Dragon Pavilion. In the remaining time, he needed to consolidate his cultivation base and realm in order to prepare for the upcoming battle of the 9 counties. Thank you, young master. Lu Tao hurriedly bowed to the ground, his face full of excitement. It was a 3rd-grade spiritual medicine. With this 6-leaf mysterious grass, there was almost no doubt that he would advance to the Yin Void realm. In the practice room, Zhuowen silently sat cross-legged. His eyes flickered as he muttered to himself, Now my cultivation has reached the late stage of the 5-wheel Emperor realm. I hope to break through to the 6-wheel Emperor realm within 3 months. And I've been at the entry level of the Nirvana Grand Sun for a while. I hope to make a breakthrough during this period of time. Great Sun Nirvana was an Emperor tier body tempering technique. Zhuowen had once opened 360 acupoints in his body on Zhongling Mountain in the Essence Chi Pagoda, reaching the entry level. The toughness of his body was comparable to an Earth tier numinous treasure. Moreover, the Nirvana Grand Sun was divided into 5 levels, namely Yuanji, annihilation, nirvana, dharma, and immortality. Zhuowen had reached the entry level, and the next level was Yuanji. Nirvana has the meaning of being reborn from fire. The Nirvana grandson has also mentioned that if I want to cultivate this body refining technique quickly, I must use the extreme yang qi. Speaking of this, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Speaking of the extreme yang qi, there was nothing more suitable than the earth fire in his body. Moreover, he had more than one kind of earth fire but 6. I don't know if it's possible to refine the body with earth fire. Thinking of this, Zhuowen stamped his foot. Suddenly, the 9-heaven thunder flame burst out from his body. Then, under Zhuowen's control, countless thunder flames immediately attached to his body. Sizzle, 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 sizzle. Instantly, the sound of burning objects rang out. Following which, Zhuowen's skin began to turn black under the high temperature of the 9-heaven thunder flame. Zhuowen couldn't help but groan in pain. Zhuowen didn't have any protective measures at the moment. Directly touching the earth fire like the 9-heaven thunder flame with his body was like being exposed to a sea of fire. One could imagine the pain he was in. Rays of golden light lit up on the surface of Zhuowen's body like small suns. The intense golden light constantly resisted the corrosion of the 9-heaven thunder flame. Old monk Zhuowen sat cross-legged within the sea of flames. Although the high temperature of the flames caused him to be in so much pain that he wished he was dead, he forcefully endured it. He knew that this little bit of pain was nothing if he wanted to become stronger. Time passed slowly. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. During these 2 months, Zhuowen was basically in hell. Regardless of whether he was cultivating or resting, he was basically immersed in the earth fire. Moreover, Zhuowen was surprised to find that the earth fire not only strengthened his physical body, but also increased the speed at which his meridians absorbed yuan qi. The speed of cultivation in the earth fire was actually several times faster than outside. During these 2 months, Zhuowen also constantly increased the number of earth fire. At first it was 1 type of earth fire. Then it slowly increased to 4 types of earth fire. Zhuowen discovered that as the number of earth fire increased, the speed of his cultivation also increased by several times. Boom! In the technique practicing room, 4 different colored earth fire constantly revolved around a figure. The figure's body was flickering with a golden light, like a god or a demon. When the temperature of the 4 types of earth fire reached its peak, the golden light on the figure's body also reached its peak. Then, the golden light soared into the sky and pierced through the roof of the technique practicing room. In the void, a golden giant that was close to 1,000 feet tall walked through the air. The golden giant was enraged, and its pillar-like feet were covered in endless golden flames. Yuanji, the golden giant spat out these 2 words. Then, its huge body turned into countless spots of light and entered Zhuowen's body. Chapter 6:14. SS Thunderwinged Rock. The golden light receded, revealing Zhuowen's strong bronze-colored upper body. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with surprise. The Nirvana Vairocana had finally broken through to the beginner level and reached the first stage, death. I can clearly feel that my physical body is many times stronger than before. With my current physical strength, I can probably break through a top-grade earth rank spiritual treasure in 1 move. He clenched his fists slightly. Instantly, a golden light flashed like the sun. His bones crackled, crisp and pleasant to the ear. Zhuowen revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Even though the strength of his body was still unable to compare with a heaven-rank spirit treasure, it had absolutely surpassed a top-grade earth-rank spirit treasure. In other words, the strength of Zhuowen's body was between top-grade earth rank and low-grade heaven rank. Zhuowen knew that if he could break through to the second stage, death, his physical body would improve even more. He should be able to reach the low-grade heaven rank. At that time, Zhuowen would be like a human-shaped spiritual treasure. His physical body would be terrifying. The phenomenon caused by the breakthrough of the Nirvana Vairocana naturally attracted the attention of many cultivators in Rattan Armor City. When these cultivators discovered that the phenomenon came from the Zhuo family, the confusion on their faces faded and was replaced by understanding. The news of Zhuowen's return had already spread throughout Rattan Armor City. The phenomenon just now was indeed shocking. However, if it was caused by Zhuowen, it was only natural for these cultivators. There's still more than a month. At that time, I should be able to leave for the imperial capital. I should be able to break through again during this time and reach the ultimate six-wheel emperor realm. Feeling the strength of his physical body, Zhuowen was very satisfied. Since the Nirvana Vairocana had already broken through, he should now focus on breaking through to the ultimate six-wheel emperor realm. Dong, dong, dong. The crisp sound of knocking slowly rang out, causing Zhuowen to frown. Then, Lu Tao's voice came from outside the door. Young master, master has invited you. I heard that an important guest is coming to the residence today and needs you to come out and welcome them. Lu Tao's voice was extremely respectful as it slowly rang out. Important guest? Hearing this, Zhuowen's face revealed a trace of surprise. He really did not know what kind of important guest it was that he needed to go out and welcome them personally. However, since this was Zhuo Xiangding's wish, Zhuowen naturally, he would not refuse. Since he had just broken through, it was Zhuo Xiangding, Zhuowen naturally, he would not refuse. N.S. Creek. When the door opened, Lu Tao stood respectfully by the door. At this time, the aura in Lu Tao's body was much stronger than it had been 2 months ago. Moreover, his every movement emitted traces of cold air, which was the sign of the Yin Void realm. It seemed that Lu Tao had successfully broken through to the Yin Void realm with the help of the six-leaf mysterious grass. Zhuowen was quite satisfied. Bring me there, Zhuowen said faintly and followed behind Lu Tao. Not long after, the two of them arrived at the family's main hall. There were many people gathered in the hall, including Zhuo Xiangding, Zhuo Baitian, and Zhuo Dingtian. The rest were basically the upper echelons of the Zhuo family. Looking at Zhuo Xiangding and the others in the hall, Zhuowen frowned. He was more curious about the so-called important guest. Grandpa! Stepping into the room, Zhuowen immediately smiled, beaming with joy. Zhuowen! Zhuo Xiangding laughed and gave Zhuowen a big hug. First Uncle Zhuo Baitian and second Uncle Zhuo Dingtian also greeted Zhuowen. The eyes of the other upper echelons glowed as they stared at Zhuowen. They knew how terrifying the status and strength of the young man in front of them was. Grandpa, Lu Tao just told me there would be an important guest. Who is this important guest? After greeting the others, Zhuowen asked curiously. Haha, you'll know later. Let's go to the city gate and wait. They should be here by noon. Speaking of which, this distinguished guest is related to you. Zhuo Xiangding's lips curled up slightly as he pretended to be mysterious. Zhuowen was confused. Could the important guest related to him be the ones from the prefecture capital? Or Lu Hantian's big brother? However, after thinking about it, Zhuowen felt that something was wrong. He could only give up and follow Zhuo Xiangding and the others to the city gate. At the city gate of Rot-Tan Armor City, Castellan Gu Yutian, Gu Xian, and the other core members were lined up on both sides of the city gate. When they saw Zhuowen and the others, they immediately went up to greet them. Zhuowen, congratulations. Gu Yutian congratulated Zhuowen as soon as he came up. This confused Zhuowen. He didn't have any good news recently. Why were all these people congratulating him? Grandpa, what's going on? Who is your important guest? Zhuowen sighed and stared at Zhuo Xiangding as he asked helplessly. Zhuo Xiangding's face was radiant. He smiled and said, Do you remember the Glan family that I told you about 2 months ago? Perhaps Glan Haohai still remembers the engagement. He sent a message yesterday, saying that someone from the Glan family would come to visit today. I'm afraid it's because of the engagement. Yes, Zhuowen, this is great news. The Glan family is one of the 5 major families in the Imperial Capital Prefecture. They have a terrifying background. If you can marry the Glan Lily, then the Zhuo family will have a chance to rise in the future. Gu Yutian came over and stared at Zhuowen with envy. The Glan Lily was quite famous in the Imperial Capital Prefecture, not to mention the sensational things she had done in the past. Just the fact that she was one of the top 10 geniuses on the Qing Huang leaderboard was enough to spread her name far and wide. Glen Baihe was a monstrous genius whose strength and potential were not inferior to Guo Sheng's. Moreover, it was said that Glen Baihe was extremely beautiful, and had a beauty that could captivate even birds and beasts. There were many geniuses who pursued her in the imperial capital county, and she was an extremely popular woman. There were many geniuses in the imperial capital prefecture who wanted to get close to such a girl but couldn't. However, Zhuowen was now engaged to such a proud girl. Even Gu Yutian felt that Zhuowen was quite lucky. Zhuowen frowned and said in a deep voice, "Did the Glan family say that they sent someone over because of the engagement? They should be here soon. The time stated on the engagement is when you are 20 years old, and the conditions of the engagement will be fulfilled. Originally, I thought that after 20 years, Glan Haohai would have forgotten about the engagement of our Zhuo family. However, it seems that Glan Haohai still remembers." At this point, Zhuo Xiangding's face was filled with a happy smile. Everyone else also had smiles on their faces. At this moment, Zhuo Xiangding was relieved, but Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He had a feeling that the people from the Grant family would not be so simple. Moreover, Zhuowen did not place much importance on the marriage contract. Now that things had turned out this way, it might really be a little tricky. Let's wait for the Glan family to arrive first. Zhuowen sighed and could only wait silently at the city gate. Time gradually flowed by. Around the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, an enormous ray of light surged over from the distant horizon. At the same time, a thunderous roar resounded across the sky, causing the entire sky to tremble. The streak of light was very fast. In the blink of an eye, it arrived above Rattan Armor City. Only then did everyone notice that the streak of light was a huge bird that was hundreds of feet long. Its entire body flickered with lightning. What was even more surprising was that this huge bird's wings were formed purely from lightning. It looked extremely colorful. Thunderwing Rock. When the huge bird appeared, many people below cried out in surprise. Their faces were filled with shock. This Thunderwing Rock was extremely famous in the Heavenly Armor continent. It was said that it possessed the bloodline of an ancient beast. At birth, it possessed the strength of an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. With lightning wings on its back, its speed was extremely terrifying. It could travel thousands of miles in a single leap. The Thunderwing Rock before them had a vast aura. It should be at the level of an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. Anyone who could possess a mount like this was either a powerful expert or a noble son from a powerful family. There were 4 figures standing on the back of the Thunderwinged Rock. One of them was a woman and 3 of them were men. The woman was about 18 years old. She was dressed in an elegant emerald dress with ribbons. She held a black whip in her hand. She was beautiful with a hint of heroism. As for the other 3 men, 2 of them were rather young. They were around the same age as Lve Tao, probably around 23 years old. One of them wore long yellow robes. He had a tall nose and held a folding fan in his hand. His clothes were elegant and graceful. The other man had a cold expression. He wore tight black robes and his eyes were long and narrowed. They were as cold as a poisonous snake's. The third person was an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. This old man stood silently behind the 3 of them. When he opened and closed his eyes, there would often be an imperceptible light flashing through them. The aura on his body was also somewhat unfathomable. An expert. Looking at the old man standing behind the 3 of them, Zhuowen's pupils shrank imperceptibly. This old man's aura was hidden extremely well. However, from that obscure aura, Zhuowen could still feel that this old man's aura contained a fatal aura. This old man's cultivation was definitely not low. Although it was not as terrifying as Su Chang's, it should be about the same as the Grand Elder of the House of Marquis Baichuan. Are the 4 of you the distinguished guests of the Grand Family? Come down quickly. Let us entertain you properly. Zhuo Xiangding clasped his hands and said in a clear voice, "Are you the head of the Zhuo family, Zhuo Xiangding?" In front of the Thunderwing Rock, the woman with the soft whip stared at Zhuo Xiangding with her beautiful eyes. Her crisp voice rang out. "That's me," Zhuo Xiangding replied with a smile. "Then who is Zhuowen?" The woman's beautiful eyes turned slightly, and her eyes immediately landed on Zhuowen, who was carrying a green coffin not far away. Zhuowen's appearance was too strange. He was constantly carrying the demon-suppressing green coffin, so it was impossible not to attract attention. "That's me." Zhuowen took large strides forward. His sharp eyes stared at the woman without avoiding her gaze as he calmly replied. What an arrogant and bold brat. Do you know who Narcissus is? She is the second miss of the grand family. Shouldn't a junior like you kneel down and greet Narcissus before speaking? Or are you simply a bastard who doesn't know any etiquette? As soon as Zhuowen finished speaking, the cold man in black standing beside the woman immediately pointed at Zhuowen and shouted. Hearing this, Zhuowen couldn't help but be stunned. However, his expression turned cold as he said indifferently, Your master hasn't said anything yet? What are you barking like a dog at the side for? Chapter 6:15. Break off the marriage. Zhuowen's expression became extremely cold. He narrowed his eyes at the man in black. He didn't seem to recognize this person at all. He had never even seen him before. However, this person kept calling Zhuowen a bastard. No matter how good a person's temper was, it was unlikely that they would accept such humiliation. Moreover, this person even asked Zhuowen to kneel down and salute. With Zhuowen's personality, it was naturally impossible for him to accept such an insult. What did you say? You little bastard, do you dare say it again? The man in black couldn't help but be stunned. He originally thought that Zhuowen would do as he said, but he didn't think that Zhuowen would dare to refute him. What right did this Zhuowen have to boast so shamelessly in front of him? He was only a disciple of a small clan from a low-level city. Zhuowen's fame was indeed great in Wuxia County, but in the distant imperial capital province, no one had heard of Zhuowen. With the arrogance of the factions in the imperial capital province, they did not even bother to investigate the situation in other provinces. As a result, although everyone in Wuxia County knew of Zhuowen, the 4 people from the imperial capital province did not know anything about Zhuowen at all. They still thought that Rattan Armor City was still a low-level city, and that the Zhuo family was an insignificant disciple of a small clan. TSK, I couldn't tell that you were such a wretch. You've obviously been scolded like a dog, yet you still want to listen to it again. You're really despicable to the bone. I'm afraid you're even worse than a street dog. Zhuowen shook his head, and the corners of his mouth were filled with a cold smile. With these words, the scene fell silent again. Not only were Zhuo Xiangding, Gu Yutian, and the others stunned, even the 4 people on the Thunderwing Rock were stunned. They all stared at the young man below with strange gazes. Did this person not know that they were from the imperial capital province? Or did a disciple of a small clan from a low-level city get the guts to refute them like this? Good. What an eloquent little bastard. Wait until I pull out all your teeth. Let's see how you'll talk then. The veins on the black-clothed man's forehead bulged. His eyes were filled with a monstrous rage as he stared coldly at Zhuowen. A terrifying aura erupted like a volcano and suddenly spread out, forming an extremely terrifying hurricane in the surroundings. Mid-Ultimate Emperor Realm? Zhuowen's eyes narrowed when he sensed the terrifying aura emanating from the man in black. The imperial capital county was truly blessed with outstanding talents. The man in black, who seemed to be the woman's attendant, had actually reached the mid-stage of the Ultimate Emperor Realm. No wonder Lu Hantian had once said that the imperial capital county's foundation and power far surpassed the other 8 counties. In addition, the top 10 on the Azure Emperor rankings were basically obtained by the geniuses of the imperial capital county. Lu Hantian's words were not an exaggeration. Silently mobilizing the energy in his body, Zhuowen was secretly on guard against the black-clothed man. Suddenly, that terrifying aura completely disappeared. The leader of the group stretched out her hand and stopped the black-clothed man, who was about to teach Zhuowen a lesson. Qin Mu, don't forget why I'm here. Don't cause any more trouble for me, the woman said coldly. Hearing this, the black-clothed man's eyes flashed. He retracted his foot and stood silently behind the woman. However, his vicious gaze was constantly fixed on Zhuowen below, like a venomous snake that had locked onto its prey. Zhuowen had insulted him in front of everyone. He was going to settle this score properly. Head of the Zhuo family, bring us to the Zhuo family hall. The green-clothed woman glanced meaningfully at Zhuowen and said indifferently. Seeing that the green-clothed woman had stopped the black-clothed man, Zhuo Xiangding heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly led the way. Zhuowen, That green-clothed woman is Glan Howren's second daughter. She's also Glan Lily's younger sister, Glan Daffodil. You better not show off too much. The Glan family is not something we can afford to offend. When Zhuowen lifted his foot to follow, Zhuo Xiangding's voice suddenly appeared in his mind. He couldn't help but be stunned. However, he still nodded and replied, "Grandfather, don't worry, I know what to do." Although he said that, Zhuowen didn't take it to heart. Zhuo Xiangding didn't know about his relationship with Lu Hantian. With Lu Hantian as his backing, Zhuowen wasn't particularly afraid of the Glan family. The Qing Xian Empire was vast, but only the Qing Emperor had reached the Emperor realm. Therefore, Lu Hantian's strength could be said to be at the peak in a certain sense. Even the head of the Glan family, Glan Haohai, was only at this level. Furthermore, Zhuowen wasn't afraid of these people making things difficult for him. This was because he still had the teleportation talisman that Lu Hantian had given him. As long as he crushed this talisman, Lu Hantian would sense it and instantly appear beside him. Glan Daffodil and the other three walked at the very front. Zhuo Xiangding was leading them from the side. His expression was extremely respectful. However, Glan Daffodil and the other three didn't appreciate it at all. Seeing Zhuo Xiangding's warm face being snubbed, Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. He didn't have a good impression of Glan Daffodil and the other three anymore. When they arrived in the hall, Glan Daffodil naturally sat in the main seat. The left and right seats were basically taken by the other three. Zhuo Xiangding didn't care at all and led the others to sit below. Meanwhile, Zhuowen sat at the last seat with a cold smile. He wanted to see why these four people came to the Zhuo family today. Haha, I didn't know that Miss Glan Daffodil had graced the Zhuo family with your presence. I wonder if Miss Glan Daffodil has come to the Zhuo family this time for the engagement from 20 years ago. Zhuo Xiangding's face was full of smiles. However, he was rather excited. Although he didn't like the attitude of Glan Daffodil and the other three, this engagement involved Zhuowen's big matter. He didn't want to ruin it because of his personal emotions. Otherwise, with Zhuo Xiangding's personality, how could he compromise like this? The corner of Glan Daffodil's mouth curled up slightly, and a smile appeared on her charming face. She said indifferently, "That engagement paper that was left in your Zhuo family back then is still there, right? Take it out and give it to me." When Glan Daffodil said this, the smile on Zhuo Xiangding's lips faded a lot. He frowned slightly and said, "What does Miss Glan Daffodil mean? Didn't you come here today to honor the engagement from back then? Why do you want us to hand over the engagement?" "Honor the engagement? Old Zhuo, I think you're really delusional, aren't you? Miss Baihe is a proud daughter of the heavens. She's one of the top existences in the entire imperial city. She's even a monstrous genius that the imperial family has paid attention to." Before Glan Daffodil could say anything, the man in black suddenly opened his mouth. His gaze swept over Zhuowen, who was sitting at the last seat, and sneered. "Do you think a little bastard like your Zhuo family has the qualifications to be worthy of Miss Baihe? I think a bastard like this is quite compatible with those pigs and dogs." Crack. When the man in black said this, Zhuo Xiangding suddenly crushed the armrest of the table. He did not look at the man in black. Instead, he stared straight at Glan Daffodil and said indifferently, "Miss Glan Daffodil, please control your family's dog. This dog's mouth is quite smelly. It's disturbing our mood. You're courting death." The man in black stood up and was furious again. He wanted to attack Zhuo Xiangding. Just now, Zhuowen had cursed him like a dog. Now that Zhuo Xiangding was rubbing salt on his wound, how could the man in black endure it? "Qin Mu, sit down. Do you still have any respect for me?" Glan Daffodil's pretty face darkened. The man in black had acted without her consent twice, which made her feel extremely displeased. At this moment, she coldly shouted, and her tone was extremely rude. "Second miss, Qin Mu was impulsive just now." The man in black named Qin Mu felt a chill in his heart and quickly admitted defeat. Although Glan Daffodil's cultivation was similar to his, the old man standing behind Glan Daffodil was an elder of the Glan family, who was specially sent by Glan Haohai to protect Glan Daffodil. This old man's strength was unfathomable, and killing him was as easy as flipping his hand. Therefore, when he saw Glan Daffodil was angry, He quickly lowered his head and admitted defeat. However, in his heart he already hated the Zhuo family. Zhuowen and Zhuo Xiangding, this grandfather and grandson pair, had made him lose face in front of everyone twice. This had already caused Qin Mu's heart to boil with killing intent. A guy who doesn't think before doing things. Holding a folding fan, the man in yellow standing on the other side of Gland Daffodil sneered. Qin Mu did not refute, but his heart became more and more furious. He stood straight on the right side of Gland Daffodil and did not say a word. Haha, Zhuo family head, don't be angry. Although Qin Mu's words are unpleasant, what he said is indeed the truth. Although your Zhuo family and the Gland family were family friends, that was in the past. Now the Gland family is one of the 5 great families of the imperial city, and is no longer what it used to be. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. The difference between your Zhuo family and our Gland family is too great. If our 2 families are still connected by marriage, then it really is somewhat inappropriate. Daffodil knows that the Zhuo family head is a reasonable person, so you shouldn't care about these things in the marriage contract, right? Gland Daffodil opened her red lips slightly, but the words that came out of her mouth made the hearts of the Zhuo family members in the hall heavy. They knew that Gland Daffodil had come to the Zhuo family this time, because of the marriage contract. However, it was not to honor the marriage contract from back then, but to break off the marriage contract. Gland Haohai also has the same intention. Zhuo Xiangding's wrist trembled slightly as he asked in a low voice. Old sure, my father personally sent him to me. Gland Daffodil smiled faintly as she pointed at the old man behind her. Hearing that, Zhuo Xiangding's heart sank to the extreme. Gland Daffodil's words undoubtedly meant that breaking the marriage contract this time was made by Gland Haohai. Good. The Gland family is indeed worthy of being one of the 5 great families of the imperial city. Our Zhuo family really can't match up to them. Gland Haohai is also good. No wonder he was once Xiaoyan's good brother. Zhuo Xiangding flicked his sleeves and left with a mocking smile. Gland Daffodil's delicate nose wrinkled slightly. Zhuo Xiangding's attitude made her a little uncomfortable, but she did not care too much about it and continued. Daffodil knows that the Zhuo family head is a reasonable person. Then, I would like to ask the Zhuo family head to hand over the marriage contract now. Zhuo Xiangding shook his head and said, the marriage contract is not with me. Head of the Zhuo family, don't play with us. Although our Gland family is quite far from Wuxia County, exterminating a small family like yours is still a piece of cake for us. Gland Daffodil's beautiful face darkened slightly as she said coldly, how impressive. Exterminating a small family with ease? Your Gland family is indeed worthy of being one of the 5 great families of the imperial city. Hehe, the marriage contract you want is with me. Chapter 616. Letter of Divorce. Whoosh. Zhuowen slowly stood up with a hint of anger in his eyes. He wasn't angry, because Glen Narcissus wanted to break the engagement. After all, he didn't know that Glen Lily, and he agreed with her breaking the engagement. However, Glen Narcissus and the other 3's attitude towards the Zhuo family made Zhuowen extremely angry. Especially Glen Narcissus' high and mighty attitude. It was as if the Zhuo family was as insignificant as ants in her eyes. His grandfather, Zhuo Xiangding, had already lowered himself, but the 4 of them felt that it was right and proper. Their words weren't courteous at all. How could Zhuowen not be angry? So it's on you. You must have seen the marriage contract, right? With your Zhuo family, a child from a small family like you isn't worthy of Sister Lily. I think you should know your place, right? Glen Narcissus glanced at Zhuowen with a mocking smile. She didn't put a mere Zhuowen in her eyes, so her words were very natural. This marriage contract was signed by Glen Haohai and my father, Zhuo Xiaotian, 20 years ago. Who do you think you are? Do you have the qualifications to change the marriage contract? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said coldly, what did you say? Who do I think I am? You're just a child from a small family. How dare you speak like that in front of me? Even the patriarch of your Zhuo family doesn't dare to be so impudent. What qualifications do you have to refute me? Glen Narcissus' face darkened. She was originally the golden branch and jade leaf of the Glen family. Since young, everything had gone according to her wishes. When had anyone ever refuted her? At this moment, Zhuowen actually talked back to her. Glen Narcissus naturally felt extremely uncomfortable in her heart. Second miss. This child is arrogant, conceited. He's clearly just a little bastard from a small family. How dare he be so impudent in front of us? Let Qin Mu teach this child a lesson for you. The black-clothed man who was originally silent suddenly stood up and cupped his hands towards Glen Narcissus. However, his gaze was fixed on Zhuowen with a cold expression. Glen Daffodil shook her head and stared at Zhuowen, saying, Zhuowen, you're not an impulsive person, are you? This time, we're only here for the marriage contract. Of course, we won't ask for it for nothing. We've also brought a lot of things as compensation. As he spoke, the Glen Daffodil flicked his finger, and a stream of light appeared and landed in the middle of the hall. Spirit ring. Zhuowen looked at the ring in Glen Narcissus's hand in surprise. His heart was slightly moved. This spirit ring could only be created by 4 supremacy realm experts. The Glen family's foundation was indeed not bad. This Glen Narcissus actually had a spirit ring. I brought 2 monarch rank armor skills, 10 4th grade spirit herbs, and a low-grade earth rank spirit artifact this time. I presume these things ought to be sufficient to compensate all of your losses, right? Glen Narcissus' words slowly sounded within the space. Immediately, the items that Glen Narcissus had mentioned earlier appeared in the middle of the hall. Looking at the 2 armor skills, 10 4th grade spirit herbs, and a low-grade earth rank spirit artifact on the ground, Zhuowen's face was filled with a cold smile. If it was the Zhuo family of the past, these items would indeed be considered extremely precious. However, it was different now. The resources that Zhuowen had obtained from the blood demon inheritance far exceeded the 3 items that Glen Narcissus had taken out. Not to mention Zhuowen, even Zhuo Xiangding, and the others probably did not think much of these items. Seeing that the upper echelons of the Zhuo family in the hall were indifferent, Glen Narcissus frowned slightly. Although these items were insignificant to the Glen family, they were like treasures to a small family like the Zhuo family. Originally, Glen Narcissus thought that these items were enough to shock Zhuo Xiangding and the others. However, she did not expect that the truth was not what she had expected. What? Is it not enough? Glen Narcissus said coldly. Zhuo Xiangding and the others did not speak. Instead, they looked at Zhuowen. Right now, the backbone of the Zhuo family was Zhuowen. Moreover, this matter was related to Zhuowen. Naturally, Zhuowen would make the decision. Seeing that Zhuo Xiangding and the others were all staring at the young Zhuowen, as if they were following Zhuowen's lead, Glen Narcissus was rather puzzled. Could it be that the huge Zhuo family was led by this Zhuowen? Perhaps it's because this marriage contract is related to this Zhuowen. That's why Zhuo Xiangding and the others are acting like this. Glen Narcissus thought to herself. She did not care much about the actions of Zhuo Xiangding and the others. At this moment, Zhuowen's gaze became colder and colder. This Glen Narcissus had never put the Zhuo family in her eyes. Her words were dignified, but in reality, her goal was to break off the marriage contract. Slowly taking out the marriage contract from his chest, Zhuowen said indifferently, "The marriage contract is indeed with me. Moreover, I'm not very interested in this marriage." "You're really sensible. It's impossible for your Zhuo family to be worthy of our Glen family. And you're even more unworthy of Sister Baiha. Wouldn't it have been better if you had taken out the marriage contract earlier?" Glen Narcissus smiled. However, Zhuowen shook his head and sneered. "Do you really think that our Zhuo family cares about your Glen family? Aren't you being a little too full of yourself?" As he spoke, Zhuowen flicked his finger. The spirit ring on his finger flickered, and he immediately took out a piece of paper and a pen. Glen Narcissus and the other 3 also noticed the spirit ring on Zhuowen's finger. Their pupils shrank. They naturally recognized the spirit ring. This spirit ring could only be owned by the 4 Supreme Realm experts. The number of people in the Glen family who could own a spirit ring did not exceed 2 digits. However, Zhuowen, who they did not put in their eyes, actually had such a precious spirit ring on his hand. How could this not surprise Glen Narcissus and the other 3? Ignoring the strange looks on the 4's faces, Zhuowen took the pen and immediately wrote on the white rice paper. What was this kid doing? Zhuowen's actions at this moment immediately caused Glen Narcissus and the other three to frown. However, they did not ask. Instead, they watched coldly from the side. They wanted to see what this kid wanted to do. In the time of 5 breaths, the rice paper was filled with perfectly round black words. Zhuowen took a deep breath, put away the pen and picked up the paper. Everything was done in one go. With a wave of his right hand, Zhuowen immediately handed the rice paper to Glen Narcissus. After that, Zhuowen's voice slowly rang out. You don't have to take the marriage contract. This is the letter of divorce that I personally wrote. Since your Glen family looks down on our Zhuo family will naturally not be cold to you. This letter of divorce will end the marriage contract between our two families. Letter of divorce? Glen Narcissus took the rice paper and browsed through the black words on the paper. However, her pretty face slowly darkened. This time, she did not come here to ask for the letter of divorce. Instead, she came here to secretly destroy the marriage contract. After all, their Glen family was one of the 5 great families of the imperial city. If others knew that their Glen family had a marriage contract with a nameless small family like the Zhuo family, it would be enough to make them a laughingstock. The purpose of their trip was naturally to destroy the marriage contract. As long as the marriage contract was destroyed, naturally, no one would know about the marriage contract between the Glen family and the Zhuo family. In addition, they would give the Zhuo family some benefits and make the Zhuo family swallow their broken teeth. Then, everything would become unknown. However, Zhuowen writing the letter of divorce in front of everyone had completely disrupted Glen Narcissus' rhythm. Glen Narcissus was very clear that if they really accepted Zhuowen's letter of divorce, then their Glen family's reputation would be destroyed in an instant. Not only had the marriage contract between the Glen family and the Zhuo family been exposed, but their Glen family's proud daughter had been divorced by a small family's disciple. This kind of scandal would greatly damage their Glen family's reputation. Zhuowen, you've got guts. Originally, I wanted to give the Zhuo family some benefits, but you're really too arrogant and stupid. Now I'll give you one more chance. Hand over the marriage contract and break one of your arms to atone for your sins. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude to the Zhuo family. Rip. Glen Narcissus tore the letter of divorce into pieces. Her pretty face was extremely gloomy as she stared at Zhuowen. Her beautiful eyes contained deep anger. Zhuowen's repeated rebuttal had finally made her unable to calm down. When Glen Narcissus' words came out, the faces of Zhuo Xiangding and the rest changed. They did not expect Glen Narcissus to be so oppressive. Haha, your Glen family is really impressive. When you first came, our Zhuo family treated you well, but you were high and mighty and looked at us coldly. When you came, you immediately asked for the marriage contract. I'm afraid you want to destroy it, right? Then I'd like to ask you, does this marriage contract have Glen Haohai's fingerprint? As he spoke, Zhuowen unfolded the marriage contract. There were 2 fingerprint marks at the bottom of the contract. These 2 fingerprint marks belonged to Zhuo Xiaotian and Glen Haohai. Glen Narcissus' expression was cold as she said coldly, "It's indeed my father's fingerprint. But so what? Do you think your Zhuo family is worthy of our Glen family? Let me tell you, that's just a toad lusting after a swan's meat. Do you really think that our Zhuo family cares about your Glen family? I just said that I don't really like this marriage contract. So why can't we cancel it? Isn't this your goal? Since that's the case, why don't you accept the letter of divorce?" Zhuowen stared straight at Glen Narcissus as he questioned coldly. The moment these words were said, Glen Daffodil was immediately speechless. Zhuowen was right. They had come to annul the engagement. Zhuowen was also very cooperative. However, in the form of a letter of divorce, it would clearly cause the Glen family to lose face. Glen Daffodil could not accept this no matter what. Letter of divorce? Zhuowen, do you think you have the right to write a letter of divorce? Sister Baihe is a proud daughter of the heavens, and in existence in the top 10 of the Qing Huang leaderboard. She's like a fairy. Do you think a lowly ant like you has the right to divorce Sister Baihe? I'm indeed here to cancel the marriage contract. This isn't a glorious matter, so we don't need the letter of divorce. We just need to destroy the marriage contract. Then our Glen family and your Zhuo family will be even, Glen Narcissus said calmly. This is indeed not a glorious matter. You keep saying that you want to cancel the marriage contract. Our Zhua family has already given you enough respect. We didn't resist shamelessly. But have you ever given our Zhua family any respect? Don't even think about destroying the marriage contract. Since you want to cancel the marriage contract, then accept my letter of divorce. Zhuo Wen's heart was filled with cold laughter. He had also faintly guessed the thoughts of the Grand Daffodil. It was likely that they wanted to settle the marriage privately. As long as the marriage contract was destroyed, the marriage contract between the Zhua and Grand Daffodil could be treated as if it had never happened. Chapter 617. Explode instantly. The atmosphere in the hall became strange. Zhuo Xiangding and the rest did not interrupt. They only stared at Zhuowen. Now that Zhuowen was the backbone of the Zhua family, they would listen to everything Zhuowen said. Sitting in the main seat, Glen Daffodil frowned. She did not expect Zhuowen to be so stubborn. He would rather offend the Glen family than take out the marriage certificate. If they wanted to break the engagement, they could only accept the divorce certificate. However, what kind of status did the Glen family have? What kind of genius was the Glen Lily? If word got out that the Grand Lily was divorced by this nameless brat, the Grand family would lose all their face. If they accepted the divorce certificate, the Glen family would lose all face. If they did not accept it, they could only form a marriage alliance with the Zhua family, but it would not be a good match. No matter which one it was, Glen Daffodil was unable to accept it. The best way was naturally to completely destroy the marriage contract and let this old matter of the past completely lose its proof. Originally, I wanted to settle this matter peacefully with the Zhua family. Unfortunately, you do not know what's good for you. The Glen Daffodil shook her head. Her beautiful eyes gradually turned cold. She said to the man in black beside her, "Qin Mu, I'll give you a chance. Snatch the marriage certificate from this kid. Then, you can do whatever you want with him." When Qin Mu heard this, he was stunned at first. Then he was pleasantly surprised. His gaze landed on Zhuowen, and he laughed evilly. "Little bastard, I really don't know where you got the confidence to reject the second lady's condition. However, this is not important. Anyway, you'll be dead soon." Previously, Zhuowen had humiliated him in front of everyone. Qin Mu had already secretly wanted to kill Zhuowen. Now that he had received the Glen Daffodil's permission, how could Qin Mu not be surprised? This time, he would definitely let this little bastard live a life worse than death. "Miss Glen, you." Zhuo Xiangding's face darkened. He wanted to stand up and attack. Unfortunately, the elder standing behind the Glen Daffodil coldly snorted. A terrifying aura burst out from his body. Instantly, the entire hall was enveloped by a vast aura. Creak. The surrounding tables and chairs were all smashed into dust by this aura. Zhuo Xiangding and the others all knelt down on one knee, their faces filled with shock and anger as they trembled. This old man's aura was too terrifying. It was not something they could resist. The head of the Zhua family. As you can see, I originally wanted to settle this matter peacefully with your Zhua family. Unfortunately, your grandson doesn't know what's good for him, so it's time to teach him a lesson, Glen Daffodil said indifferently. Boom! The moment the old man's aura erupted, another terrifying pressure swept over from the front of the hall. Zhuowen, who was standing at the end, lightly patted the green coffin on his back. In an instant, 1/3 of the lid opened, and a terrifying pressure that had reached his critical point surged out. It was like a protective shield that blocked the terrifying aura released by the old man. The moment the pressure of the green coffin was released, Zhuo Xiangding and the rest all felt their bodies relax. They all stood up and came behind Zhuowen, staring at Glen Narcissus and the other three in the main seat of the hall with fear. Grandfather, leave first. This is not a place where you can stay, Zhuowen said softly as he tilted his head slightly. Yes, Zhuowen, you have to be careful. The Glen family has bullied our Zhua family. Even if our Zhua family is far inferior to the Glen family, we will not back down because of this. If you can't block it, run for your life. Although our cultivation is not strong, if we fight with our lives on the line, we can still take out one of you. After Zhuo Xiangding finished speaking, He led the others out of the hall. Zhuowen's strength was far superior to theirs. Previously, Zhuowen's performance in the Marquis of Baichuan's residence had completely stunned everyone. Among Glen Narcissus and the other three, the white-haired old man's strength was the most terrifying. From the aura he released, this old man's strength should be about the same as the black-robed old man from the Marquis of Baichuan's residence. However, he was slightly weaker than the white-robed old man. He should be around the early stage of the ultimate seven-wheel emperor realm. What? He actually blocked Elder Shi's aura. This kid. When Elder Shi's aura was completely blocked by the pressure of the green coffin, shock appeared on the faces of Glen Narcissus and the others. They knew very well just how terrifying Elder Shi's strength was. He was an initial stage 7 chakra emperor. Although such an existence was not rare in the Glen family, in a low-level city like Rot-Tan Armor City, he was considered a rare existence. It was even impossible for such an expert to exist. However, Elder Shi's terrifying aura had been blocked. Moreover, it was blocked by Zhuowen, whom they looked down on. This drastic contrast immediately made Glen Narcissus' face turn extremely ugly. Elder Shi, what's going on? Is this kid's strength so strong that he can actually release such a terrifying aura? Glen Narcissus asked Elder Shi in a low voice. Elder Shi narrowed his eyes and immediately noticed the green coffin behind Zhuowen that had been opened by a third. He said in a low voice, "This aura is not released by this kid. It's released by the strange green coffin behind him. I'm afraid that there's an extremely terrifying creature sealed in that green coffin." It's that strange green coffin? Looks like this Zhuowen has had a fortuitous encounter. He actually has such a treasure on him, Glen Narcissus said coldly as her beautiful eyes narrowed. I can block this aura. This kid's aura is not strong. He should be around the level of an ultimate first-wheel emperor. Qin Mu quickly finish him off. Elder Shi said indifferently. Zhuowen had the divine aura concealment jade that Lu Hantian had given him. Not only could this item hide the true aura of a soul treasure, it could even hide the aura of Zhuowen's cultivation to an extremely weak level. If one's strength had not reached Lu Hantian's level, it would probably be very difficult to see through Zhuowen's true aura under the divine aura concealment jade. The fear on Qin Mu's face slowly receded. The terrifying aura that had surged out from Zhuowen had given even him a fright. He had thought that Zhuowen's cultivation was extremely terrifying. Now that he had heard Elder Shi's explanation, he naturally felt much more at ease. He said coldly, "A little bastard from a mere low-level city has actually reached the ultimate emperor realm. Looks like you've had quite a few fortuitous encounters. It's a pity that you're only at the first-wheel emperor realm. It's nothing in front of me. Are you done with your nonsense? Since you've said enough, then stop barking like a dog. Come and bite me," Zhuowen said coldly with a smirk. "What? You little bastard. Very good. You've angered me time and time again. I'll definitely kill you." The veins on Qin Mu's forehead bulged as he spat out the word kill. The aura of a mid-stage ultimate emperor realm cultivator completely surged out as he arrived above Zhuowen in an instant. His right hand formed into a claw and pressed down. Instantly, the surrounding yuan qi swept out, forming a giant claw that was dozens of feet long as it descended towards Zhuowen's head. Die. How laughable. Zhuowen smiled coldly. He gently raised his right hand, and a golden light surged out, directly meeting the giant claw in the sky. He actually wanted to use his physical body to fight it. What a reckless little bastard. You actually dare to use your physical body to take my full force attack. You're simply courting death. Qin Mu laughed, the mocking smile on his face growing even more intense. Crack. A clear sound appeared, and the mocking smile on Qin Mu's face immediately froze. His pupils shrunk to the size of a needle. He saw that Zhuowen's simple and unadorned punch was not only completely unharmed when it smashed onto the huge claw. Instead, the huge claw shattered inch by inch like a glass plate. The golden light flashed through the air and instantly reached Qin Mu's chest. Then, Qin Mu felt a sharp pain in his chest and blood spurted out of his mouth. He fell to the ground like a withered leaf, causing the ground to crack and turn into a giant crater. Qin Mu had actually been defeated in one move. What? How is this brat so strong? Qin Mu was defeated in one move. Grand Lily clenched her fists. Her beautiful eyes narrowed as she exclaimed in a low voice. At this moment, Qin Mu was lying in the crater, twitching continuously like a dead dog. He even spat out white foam from his mouth and his eyes rolled back. His entire body was extremely weak. Die! Zhuowen was expressionless. He leaped up and his body sank. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him, forming a 1,000-pound drop. His knees that were covered in golden light directly landed on Qin Mu, who was in the crater. The strength that Zhuowen had used in this attack was several times more terrifying than the previous one. If Qin Mu was hit, he would definitely die. Qin Mu, who was in the crater, also felt the dazzling figure in the sky. His eyes were already filled with fear. He had not expected that this young man, who he had never thought highly of, would actually possess such terrifying strength. Swoosh! A yellow shadow flashed past and Qin Mu, who was twitching on the ground, was immediately taken away by this yellow shadow. Rumble! Zhuowen landed directly on the ground. Golden light flickered, and a powerful force accompanied the golden light swept out with Zhuowen as the epicenter. It turned into a spiral hurricane, and countless rocks flew in all directions like a meteor shower. The entire hall finally collapsed completely under this force, and turned into ruins. Under the protection of Old Sure, the Gland Daffodil instantly left the hall. The expression of the elegant yellow-clothed young man, who was holding a folding fan and had rescued Qin Mu, changed slightly. He also hurriedly left the hall. On the empty ground outside the hall, Grand Lily and the other 3 people landed miserably on the ground. As for the Zhua family's huge guest hall, it instantly collapsed and turned into ruins. This brat. Why is he so terrifying? Is he really a disciple of a small family in a low-grade city? The young man in yellow held Qin Mu and said with a fearful expression. Hearing this, the pretty face of the great Glen Daffodil by the side immediately became a little ugly. She also did not expect that such a turning point would occur. Originally, as far as she was concerned, this trip to the Zhua clan to annul the engagement should be extremely smooth. But she never imagined that Zhuowen, who appeared out of nowhere, would actually be so difficult to deal with, to the point that even Qin Mu was defeated in a single move. Qin Mu was the #1 genius of the Qin family, which was a subsidiary family of the Grand Lily. His strength had reached the middle stage of the 5-wheel Ultimate Emperor realm. In the area that the Grand Lily controlled, he was rather famous. Grand Lily's cultivation was on par with Qin Mu's. Even Qin Mu had been defeated so thoroughly. If she were to face this brat, the result would be self-evident. Rumble! An earth-shattering sound was heard. In the ruins of the hall, a golden figure suddenly broke out. Accompanied by countless rocks, he walked towards the empty ground step by step. Chapter 6:18. SS4 symbols roulette. At this moment, Zhuowen carried the green coffin on his back. His body glowed with golden light as he walked step by step towards the open space. A terrifying pressure flowed out from the green coffin. The surrounding rocks floated up and turned into a sandstorm. As he walked slowly towards the open space, Zhuowen raised his head and stared at Grand Narcissus and the others. He gently opened the green coffin on his back. His right hand suddenly stopped, and the green coffin stood on the ground like a giant stone tablet. With the green coffin as the center, the terrifying pressure spread out in all directions in the form of a ring. The strength of the pressure was actually much stronger than before. Glen Narcissus and the other 3's faces changed again. Grand Narcissus' face paled slightly, but she was still able to maintain her composure. She turned to Elder Sure and said, "Elder Sure, what's his cultivation level?" "Peak of the Ultimate Emperor stage." At this moment, Elder Sure's wrinkled face was filled with a grave expression. When Zhuowen had defeated Qin Mu with a single move, Elder Sure had sensed the aura that had flowed out from Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's aura had actually reached the peak of the ultimate 5-wheel Emperor realm. Hearing this, Glen Daffodil could not help but be stunned. She had never imagined that Zhuowen's strength would actually reach the peak of the ultimate 5-wheel Emperor realm. This person looked to be at most 19 years old. To be able to reach such a cultivation level at such an age, he could be considered a genius, even in the imperial capital. How is this possible? How could the Zhou family nurture a genius with such a cultivation level? Grand Narcissus muttered to herself in disbelief. Second miss, this person's talent is very strong. Although he's not as strong as first miss, his talent is probably close to hers. Elder Sure shook his head and sighed. Humph. So what if this person's talent is good? A peak of the ultimate emperor stage is nothing in front of Sister Baiha. How can this person be worthy of Sister Baiha? Grand Narcissus bit her cherry lips and said coldly. The talent and strength that Zhuowen displayed were indeed not bad. Unfortunately, he was too far from Grand Narcissus. How could he be worthy of her Sister Baiha? In addition, this person was born lowly. He had no right to be compared to the Grand Narcissus. Furthermore, she had Elder Sure by her side. Zhuowen, a mere peak of the ultimate emperor stage, could not do anything to the four of them. Peak ultimate emperor realm? Second young miss, why don't you let me have a go at this kid? When he saw that Zhuowen's strength was at the peak of the ultimate five-wheel emperor realm, the yellow-robed youth, who had been full of fear, heaved a sigh of relief. His strength had already reached the level of a half-step six-wheel ultimate emperor. His strength was even above that of a peak five-wheel ultimate emperor. If it wasn't for the interference of Zhuowen's green coffin, he was confident that he could defeat Zhuowen. Moreover, he also wanted to perform well in front of the Glen Daffodil. The Glen Daffodil's position in the Glen family was not low. If he was promoted by her, his future would be worry-free. Mulin, you have to be careful. I'm afraid this kid isn't simple. This old man will help you offset the pressure released by the green coffin. Old Sure nodded. Qin Mu couldn't compare to Mulin. He was an existence who was half a step into the ultimate six-wheel emperor realm. His strength was much stronger than Qin Mu's. Elder Sure had some confidence in Mulin. The yellow-robed Mulin closed his fan and nodded. Then, he stepped forward and faced the youth beside the green coffin. He said, Zhuowen, I think you're a smart person. The strength of the Glen family isn't something you can imagine. If you don't want to bring disaster to your Zhuo family, I think it's best for you to bind your arms and follow us back to the Glen family. You don't have to worry about us harming you. As long as you hand over the marriage contract and follow us back to the Glen family, with your talent and strength, I'm afraid the Glen family will put you in an important position. Mulin's tone was gentle and refined. He had a smile on his face and gave people a feeling of a spring breeze. At first glance, people would have a good impression of him. However, Zhuowen didn't fall for it. He snorted coldly and said, Hand over the marriage contract, bind my arms, and follow you back to the Glen family? I think there's something wrong with your head. Who do you think you are? You actually want me to bind my arms and follow you back? If I really do that, won't my life be completely in your hands? Before you speak, you'd better use your brain. Don't show off your high and mighty attitude in front of me. You don't know how laughable and stupid it is in my eyes. The smile on Mulin's face froze and his eyes narrowed. This Zhuowen was really rude. No matter how good Mulin's temper was, he couldn't help but feel annoyed. If that's the case, then don't blame me for not showing mercy. Mulin sneered and stomped his foot. The aura of a half-step six-wheel ultimate emperor flowed out violently. His clothes and hair fluttered in the wind. He, who was originally suave and elegant, looked even more charming and graceful at this moment. Will you die if you don't show off? Zhuowen sneered. He formed a seal with both hands, and two pairs of thunder wings burst out from his back. The thunder wings opened and closed. Zhuowen turned into lightning and flashed behind Mulin in an instant. His right fist, which was covered in golden light, shuttled through space and punched toward Mulin's back. So fast. Mulin's expression changed drastically. He didn't expect Zhuowen to be so fast. He didn't even notice that Zhuowen had flashed behind him. Four symbols roulette. Block it for me. Although he was shocked, Mulin's reaction wasn't slow. He instantly took out a roulette spiritual treasure and formed a seal with his right hand. Suddenly, an earth-shattering elephant's roar rolled out like thunder and spread throughout the entire area. Then, a golden spinning roulette appeared behind Mulin. Four illusory golden elephants appeared around the roulette and stood in four different directions, maintaining the roulette's rotation. Boom! The moment Mulin took out the four symbols roulette, Zhuowen's golden fist arrived as expected. It instantly reached the roulette and the two collided. Golden light burst out in all directions, as if the sun had exploded. It was dazzling and blinding. As the golden light flashed, Zhuowen's fist seemed to have fallen into a swamp and actually froze. Humph! Zhuowen, the four symbols roulette is a top-grade Earth-rank spiritual treasure. Do you think you can break this spiritual treasure by relying on your physical strength? Mu Lin sneered under the four symbols roulette. I can't break it? Zhuowen sneered. The muscles on his right arm swelled, and the golden light in his body soared to a terrifying level. Nirvana of the Great Sun, Nirvana! With a low roar, the golden light on the surface of Zhuowen's body reached its peak and turned into a golden pillar that soared into the sky. Suddenly, in the void behind Zhuowen, a giant that was close to 1,000 feet tall stepped out and slammed its huge palm on the four symbols roulette. Crack! A crisp sound rang out. Under Mu Lin's horrified gaze, the four symbols roulette crumbled inch by inch and turned into fine powder. How is this possible? This guy's physical body can actually destroy the four symbols roulette. This guy. The moment the four symbols roulette shattered, this was the only thought in Mu Lin's mind. Then, Zhuowen's fist arrived as expected and slammed heavily on his chest. The sound of bones cracking rang out, and Mu Lin fell miserably at the feet of Glen Daffodil and Eldersher. What a terrifying physical body! Eldersher's pupils shrank as he stared deeply at Zhuowen, who was covered in golden light. After Mu Lin was defeated, Zhuowen's gaze turned slightly and landed on Glen Daffodil and Eldersher. He said indifferently, "Marriage certificate. Do you still want it?" Glen Daffodil's pretty face turned pale. She stared deeply at Zhuowen and said to Eldersher, "Eldersher, this guy is too presumptuous. Capture him for me. He injured Qin Mu and Mu Lin. If we don't capture him, where will our Glen family's prestige go?" Second miss. This guy's talent is extremely terrifying. We don't need to offend him too much. Eldersher frowned slightly. He could see that Zhuowen's potential was extremely terrifying. If this guy was given a certain amount of time, it was not impossible for his strength to catch up to Glen Daffodil. He felt that it was not worth offending Zhuowen too much. Glen Daffodil said coldly, "Eldersher, my father has instructed you to listen to me this time. Don't tell me you want to go against my father's wishes?" Hearing this, Eldersher sighed slightly. He could only walk towards Zhuowen and said indifferently, "Zhuowen, your talent is not bad. It's a pity that you have shown off your abilities. This kind of character is not beneficial to your future development. You can't afford to offend the Glen family. Showing off my abilities? Don't tell me that I have to swallow my pride when I'm being oppressed. Do I have to break my teeth and swallow it? If I'm so cowardly in martial arts, how can I become a strong person?" Zhuowen sneered. "I'm not going to argue with you. Since you're so stubborn, I can only capture you and bring you back to the Glen family. When the time comes, the head of the family will punish you." Eldersher shook his head. The aura in his body once again expanded by a few times. His robes fluttered in the wind and actually faintly suppressed the pressure of green coffin. An initial stage 7-wheel Emperor Realm martial artist. I want to have a good look at him. Looking at the expanding aura of Eldersher, Zhuowen exuded an extremely sharp battle intent. This time, his cultivation, spear intent, and nirvana of the Great Sun had all improved. It might be a little difficult for him to face off against an initial stage 7-wheel Emperor Realm martial artist, but he might be able to put up a fight. Whoosh! Eldersher was as immovable as a mountain, but as swift as lightning. He instantly appeared above Zhuowen. His veiny claw stretched out and pressed towards Zhuowen's forehead. Nirvana of the Great Sun, death. With a low roar, Zhuowen was not to be outdone. He once again released the first level of Nirvana of the Great Sun, death. In the void behind him, the giant stepped forward again. Countless golden flames enveloped Zhuowen. The giant waved its golden fist and punched at Eldersher. "Humph! You're just a mantis trying to stop a chariot." Eldersher snorted coldly. The claw that was pressing down suddenly changed and immediately met the golden giant. The tiny claw and the giant fist collided, and endless waves of air swirled in the air. Bang! The golden giant roared and exploded into countless golden lights. However, Eldersher was not harmed at all. Thump, thump, thump. Zhuowen groaned and retreated continuously. The golden light on the surface of his body gradually dimmed, and even showed signs of cracking. As expected of an ultimate stage 7-wheel Emperor realm martial artist, the nirvana of the Great Sun's death can't do any damage to him at all. Zhuowen muttered to himself in a serious tone. Zhuowen, even your strongest physical body can't stop me. Now you'd better surrender obediently. Don't force me to kill you, Elder Shi said indifferently as he slowly walked towards Zhuowen. Haha, you said my strongest physical body is my strongest physical body? I'm afraid you're wrong. My strongest physical body is not my strongest physical body, but clang. Chapter 619. SS Terrifying Spear Intent. Elder Shi's expression froze. After using the nirvana of the Great Sun, Zhuowen's strength was comparable to an ordinary 6-chakra emperor. However, Zhuowen still said that his physical strength was not his forte. Spear techniques? Unfortunately, so what if your spear techniques are impressive? Your strength is at most comparable to an ultimate 6-chakra emperor. However, I am at the early stage of the ultimate 7-chakra emperor realm. I am not someone you can contend against. Elder Shi shook his head. He took a step forward and his body moved. In an instant he was above Zhuowen's head. His withered, branch-like palm pressed down, and a terrifying palm print descended from the void. With Elder Shi's help, this kid will definitely be captured. A mere Zhuo family disciple actually dares to reject the Grand Family's offer. He is simply an ant trying to shake a tree. He overestimates himself. The Grand Narcissus lips curled up slightly. Her beautiful face was filled with coldness. Zhuowen's strength was indeed beyond her expectations. However, Elder Shi was an ultimate 7-chakra Emperor realm expert. He was much stronger than Zhuowen. Capturing this Zhuowen would be an easy task. Looking at the huge palm print descending from the sky, Zhuowen's expression was extremely grave. Although Elder Shi was slightly weaker than Elder He from the Marquis of Baichuan's residence, he was still an ultimate 7-chakra Emperor realm expert. Back then, Zhuowen had relied on Lu Hantian's domineering spear intent to finally kill Elder He. Now Zhuowen did not have Lu Hantian's spear intent anymore. Fortunately, in the process of Zhuo Wen and Guo Sheng's exchange of pointers, Zhuowen had comprehended the next level of spear intent. At this time, his strength had already doubled. Although it was unlikely that he could defeat Old Shi, he could still barely resist him. This spear has a soul. It is called spear intent, Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He was as immovable as a mountain. However, when he moved like a thunderbolt. He pulled out his bone spear and straightened his back like a spear. A cold light swept out from the tip of the spear. A mysterious concept exploded. The space around Zhuowen seemed to freeze as a surge of sharp spear intent soared into the sky. Clang! Zhuowen moved. With a swing of his bone spear, it pierced through space and instantly arrived above the palm imprint. The will of the long spear erupted, transforming into numerous spear shadows in the void. Instantly, countless terrifying explosions spread out, causing the surrounding space to collapse layer by layer. Rumble! Suddenly, the spear shadow and the palm print exploded at the same time. The earth-shattering explosion spread through the void, and then disappeared into the void. What? He actually blocked Old Shi's attack. How did this kid do it? Glen Narcissus' beautiful eyes widened as she muttered to herself in disbelief. Old Shi's eyes narrowed slightly as a grave expression finally appeared on his wrinkled face. He said in surprise, "This is spear intent. Moreover, it is far beyond the elementary level of spear intent. Could it be that your spear intent has reached the next level?" Old Shi finally understood why Zhuowen said that he was most proficient in spear techniques. It turned out that this kid had actually comprehended the illusory concept of power. Moreover, it was the extremely overbearing spear intent. This kid was truly terrifying. Spear intent? How could this be? How could this Zhuowen possibly comprehend the concept of spear intent? Once Old Shi's words came out, Glen Narcissus, who was not far away, was finally shocked. Their Glen family was one of the 5 big families of the imperial capital county. Naturally, They were much more clear about the concept of power than ordinary warriors. It could be said that warriors who could comprehend the concept of power were all peerless talents and terrifying monstrous geniuses with boundless prospects. Such geniuses were rare even in the imperial capital county. Among the younger generation of the Glen family, the only one who could comprehend the concept of power was Glen Lily. As for the other younger generation of the Glen family, they had not succeeded in comprehending the concept of power. It could be seen how difficult it was to comprehend the concept of power. However, Zhuowen, who she looked down upon from a small family, had not only comprehended the concept of power, but also the extremely overbearing spear intent. Moreover, his spear intent had even reached the next level. She was very clear about how terrifying warriors who could comprehend the concept of power were. Such monstrous geniuses were basically invincible among those of the same level. They were terrifying existences who could challenge those of a higher level at will. Perhaps their cultivation was not very high, but when they fought, they were far more powerful than ordinary warriors. At this moment, Zhuowen's fighting spirit was soaring. He wanted to test if he, who had mastered the next level of spear intent, could have the power to fight against an initial 7-wheel ultimate king realm warrior. Haha! Again! With a loud laugh, Zhuowen's aura was like a rainbow. The spear intent around him surged and a cold light overflowed. With the help of 2 pairs of thunder wings, Zhuowen arrived in front of Old Shur in an instant. The bone spear shuttled through the void and instantly swept towards Old Shur with a cold light. Old Shur's expression changed slightly. With a low roar, he stretched out his claws again. A huge amount of power gathered in his claws, like an indestructible weapon, instantly blocking the terrifying spear light that pierced towards him. Clang! 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 The sound of metal clashing instantly surged in this area like countless firecrackers, almost shaking the clouds in the sky. Eat my spear again! Zhuowen roared and moved his spear. The momentum of the bone spear changed. Like a poisonous snake, it swept out at a tricky angle and sealed all the major acupoints on Old Shur's body. Every strike was fatal. Old Shur snorted coldly. The speed of his claws soared to the extreme. Zhuowen's terrifying spear momentum was instantly blocked by him. At the same time, his left hand, which was ready to attack, suddenly slammed out towards Zhuowen's chest. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up slightly. The seal in his hands changed again. The lightning on his back suddenly surged violently. Old Shur was surprised to find that another pair of thunder wings had grown out of the 2 pairs of thunder wings on Zhuowen's back. The third pair of lightning wings that had suddenly appeared were dozens of feet wide. Lightning flashed and an illusory figure of a dragon appeared. Numerous deafening dragon roars continuously resounded over the place. Swoosh! In an instant, Zhuowen's speed increased by several times. He immediately dodged Old Shur's left palm, which was ready to attack. Lightning flashed and he stopped more than 10 meters away. The third pair of thunder wings was naturally the thunder dragon wings. Zhuowen had obtained it from the blood demon legacy. The cultivation of the thunder dragon wings was much more difficult than the thunder serpent wings and thunder serpent wings. Even with Zhuowen's extraordinary comprehension, it took him nearly 3 months to grasp the basics of this technique. At this moment, facing an expert like Old Shur, Zhuowen naturally did not hold back and used the thunder dragon wings. Holding the bone spear in his hand, 3 pairs of thunder wings on his back, lightning flashed, spear intent revolved around him, and his black hair danced in the wind. At this moment, Zhuowen quietly stood in the air. His rainbow-like aura was like a god descending to the mortal world. What a terrifying brat! Looking at the peerless youth in front of him, Old Shur's gaze was complicated. He could feel that this brat was not an ordinary person. Again, Zhuowen's clear voice resounded between heaven and earth. Once again, he turned into lightning and clashed with Old Shur, whose robes were fluttering in the wind. Suddenly, a series of explosions resounded in the air. Ring-shaped waves of air spread out in all directions. The aftermath spread out and distorted the space around them. The 2 of them fought from the sky to the ground, and from the ground to the sky. The terrifying aftermath of the battle constantly spread out and exploded in the sky above Rot-Tan Armor City. It was as if countless fireworks were sprinkling down from the sky. Zhuowen's spear intent was pushed to the extreme. Originally, Zhuowen was completely at a disadvantage against Old Shi. He had completely relied on the speed of the Thunder Dragon wings to avoid Old Shi's terrifying attacks. However, as the battle heated up, Zhuowen became more and more courageous. His terrifying spear intent also became sharper in the process of the battle. It was as if the originally rusty blade had become sharper and easier to wield under constant polishing. After all, Zhuowen had mastered the advanced spear intent. He was not particularly proficient with it. However, as he continued to fight with Old Shi, Zhuowen became more and more proficient with this newly mastered spear intent. He was able to wield it more and more smoothly. Naturally, the power of his spear intent was constantly multiplying like a rocket. The more Old Shi fought, the more frightened he became. He could see that Zhuowen was using him as a whetstone. He could clearly feel that Zhuowen's spear intent was becoming more and more unstoppable. It was becoming more and more easy to handle. This Zhuowen can't even take down Old Shi? In the open space, Glen Daffodil's cherry lips were slightly open, looking at the imposing young man. Her beautiful eyes were already filled with shock. This Zhuowen's performance had exceeded her expectations time and time again. She really did not know how to express her feelings at this moment. At this moment, Qin Mu and Mu Lin, who were squinting slightly, stood beside Glen Daffodil while supporting each other. The two of them looked at each other and revealed a bitter expression. They had never imagined that Zhuowen's strength would be so strong. Even more so, they had not expected him to have comprehended the terrifying spear intent. Now, even Old Shi, who was at the initial stage of the Seven-Wheel Emperor realm, could not completely suppress this young man. What kind of freak is this? How did a family from a small low-level city cultivate such a terrifying monster? In fact, the two of them were even more puzzled. They could not imagine how Zhuowen, who was born in such a lowly place, had cultivated to such a terrifying level. This young man's talent was actually comparable to the top geniuses of the imperial city. Boom! Explosions sounded in the sky. Then, the two figures suddenly separated and retreated more than 10 meters away. They stared at each other from afar. Zhuowen, you are very strong. This time, we have miscalculated. We do not want the marriage certificate. Let us leave here. Old Shi said with a gloomy expression. Zhuowen's strength had greatly exceeded his expectations. Although he could suppress Zhuowen in battle, Zhuowen had the Thunder Dragon wings and was too fast. Even he could not catch up with Zhuowen. In addition to that terrifying spear intent, Old Shi really could not do anything to Zhuowen. Whoosh! Zhuowen slowly descended and stood on the green coffin in the open space. He looked down at Glen Daffodil, who was not far away, and said indifferently, "Didn't you come here to cancel the marriage? This time, naturally, I will not let you return disappointed. Accept my letter of divorce and leave Rattan Armor City." What? Zhuowen, what did you say? You actually want us to accept the letter of divorce? Don't even think about it, Glen Daffodil said coldly with a gloomy expression. Boom! Chapter 620. Grand Oceanden's cold light flickered as Grand Narcissus' beautiful eyes narrowed. Immediately, she felt a chill on her neck. Looking at the cold and indifferent young man in front of her, Grand Narcissus' throat trembled as she said in a trembling voice, "Zhuowen, you better not mess around. I'm the second miss of the Grand family." In the sky, Old Shi's expression changed. With the lightning wings, Zhuowen's speed was too fast. Although his strength was above Zhuowen's in terms of speed, Zhuowen was much faster than him. Zhuowen, you're too bold to point your spear at the second Mississippi. Do you know what you're doing? Qin Mu and Mu Lin's expressions changed when they saw Grand Narcissus being pointed at by the bone spear. They both released their attacks to stop Zhuowen. You two trash, get out of my way. Zhuowen shouted coldly. He lifted Grand Narcissus with his left hand and swung the bone spear with his right hand. Qin Mu and Mu Lin were like withered leaves as they flew back with blood spurting out of their mouths. Zhuowen, let go of Miss Narcissus. You're too bold. Elder Shi shouted and descended from the sky, aiming directly at Zhuowen's head. His aura was like a dragon, and his might was like a tiger. Zhuowen's threat of the Glen Daffodil had completely angered Eldershire. Feeling the terrifying pressure from above, Zhuowen's expression changed. A powerful force gushed out and completely suppressed Grand Narcissus, who was still struggling. 3 pairs of lightning wings unfolded on his back, and he instantly dodged Old Shire's attack. Zhuowen stepped on the air and tapped on the green coffin. He said coldly, "If I were you, I wouldn't act rashly because the spear in my hand is definitely faster than yours. I can definitely kill this woman before you arrive." As he spoke, Zhuowen tightened his grip on the bone spear in his hand. The cold spear tip was placed horizontally on Glen Narcissus' spotlessly white neck. Traces of coldness caused Glen Narcissus' delicate body to stiffen, not daring to move in the slightest. She was truly afraid that Zhuowen would act recklessly and end her. Hearing this, Eldershire froze and said coldly, "What do you want to let second miss go? Your grand family is one of the 5 great families of the imperial city. Our Zhuo family is indeed out of our league. Of course, I have no interest in forming a marriage alliance with your grand family. Therefore, you must accept my letter of divorce. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the second daughter of the grand family will not be able to walk out of the Zhuo family's door." Once again tightening his grip on the bone spear, Zhuowen's voice became incomparably cold as 10,000-year-old profound ice. "What do you think? The second daughter of the Grant family." At this moment, Glen Daffodil was so scared that her face turned pale. She had not expected Zhuowen to be so daring, and his strength to be so terrifying. All of this had far exceeded her expectations. "Zhuowen, what you did was very unwise. We no longer intend to take back the marriage certificate. Why are you still forcing us to accept the letter of divorce?" Eldershire's face darkened slightly. "Aggressive? I would like to ask, who was the one who forced me to hand over the marriage certificate in the first place? Who was the one who wanted to cripple my cultivation and bring me back to the grand family? Who was the one who was so overbearing, high and mighty, and used the grand family to pressure our Zhuo family? Let me tell you, although our Zhuo family is an insignificant small family, it is not without dignity and status. Although your grand family is powerful, our Zhuo family is not your grand family's servant. If you provoke us, even if we die, we will bite off a piece of your grand family's flesh." Once these words were spoken, Eldershire immediately fell silent. What Zhuowen said was right. At the beginning, they were indeed the ones who were overbearing. They were even the ones who started the fight. Now they were saying that Zhuowen was being overbearing. It was indeed somewhat laughable. Either accept the letter of divorce or die. Zhuowen stared coldly at Glen Daffodil in his hand. Every word was like a gem. His tone was cold and murderous. Glen Daffodil's delicate body trembled. She gritted her teeth and said, "Zhuowen, you are the one who has pushed me too far. You will regret it." As she spoke, Glen Daffodil had unknowingly taken out a golden talisman and immediately crushed it. In an instant, a golden light shone brightly, and a terrifying aura surged out. Zhuowen's expression changed greatly. He could not help but retreat and let go of Glen Daffodil. Teleportation talisman? Zhuowen recognized the talisman that Glen Daffodil crushed. This talisman was exactly the same as the one that Lu Hantian had given him. He knew that this was definitely a teleportation talisman that a powerhouse had left for Glen Daffodil. Damn it! Could it be the head of the grand family, Grand How High? Slowly retreating to the side of the green coffin, Zhuowen secretly took out Lu Hantian's teleportation talisman. He knew that if it was really Grand How High, he could only summon Lu Hantian. Otherwise, with his strength, it would be like hitting a rock with an egg. The golden light faded, and a majestic figure stepped out from the black hole in the void. With a stomp of his foot, he landed directly beside Glen Daffodil. A supreme and terrifying aura suddenly burst out from this majestic figure. This person could actually cause the surrounding space to distort and collapse with just a raise of his hand. It was too terrifying. This person was tall and slender, with eyes as bright as stars, long eyebrows that reached his temples, and a smile on the corner of his mouth. His attitude was free and easy, and he had a unique elegance. He seemed to be an otherworldly person. However, The aura that was released from the surface of his body was extremely terrifying. It was as if countless suns, moons, and stars were falling for him. Daffodil, why did you use a teleportation talisman? This is Zhuo family? As soon as this middle-aged man with an elegant temperament appeared here, a trace of doubt appeared on his handsome face. Father, I was almost killed by this little bastard called Zhuowen. Glen Daffodil immediately threw herself into the middle-aged man's arms. Her beautiful eyes were filled with grievances. Greetings, family head. Elder Shi, Qin Mu, and Mu Lin immediately came to the middle-aged man's side respectfully. Their faces were filled with reverence. Elder Shi, what exactly happened? The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and looked at the aggrieved Glen Daffodil in his arms. He asked coldly. Elder Shi sighed. He had no choice but to tell Zhuowen everything that had happened. Elder Shi was rather upright. He didn't add any details to smear Zhuowen's reputation. Instead, he told the truth. Qin Mu and Mu Lin were both defeated? Even you can't do anything to Zhuowen? When the middle-aged man heard this, he raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man beside the green coffin not far away in surprise. At this moment, Zhuowen's breathing was rapid as he stared at the middle-aged man. He knew that this middle-aged man should be the family head of the Glen family, Glen Haohai. At the same time, he was also a good brother of his father, Zhuo Xiaotian. You are Zhuowen? Xiaotian's son? Glen Haohai looked up and down at Zhuowen. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he said softly. Zhuowen nodded and said in a deep voice, I heard from my grandfather that you were a good brother of my father. Then, you should know why my father went missing back then, right? Tell me what happened back then. Zhuowen, you are really bold. Is the family head of the Glen family someone you can talk back to? Quickly kneel down and apologize. Qin Mu suddenly shouted at Zhuowen. Now that he had Glen Haohai's support, Qin Mu became arrogant again. Hatred flashed in his eyes. This Zhuowen had made him lose face. He could not let it go just like that. Shut your dog mouth. No one will think you are mute if you don't speak. If you continue to blabber, I will kill you. Zhuowen abruptly shouted at Qin Mu, his words causing Qin Mu to be stunned. Zhuowen continued staring at Grant Haohai as he continued. What was the secret of that year? Where did my father go? Family head. This kid did not put you in his eyes at all. This little bastard who does not know etiquette must be eliminated to prevent future troubles. Qin Mu said with a gloomy face. Yes. Father, this little bastard almost killed me. You must kill him to relieve the hatred in my heart. Glen Daffodil hurriedly agreed. Enough. I will deal with this matter. You two don't have to worry about it. Glen Haohai said indifferently. Instantly, Glen Narcissus and Qin Mu kept quiet out of fear, and did not dare to speak. Zhuowen, you are indeed Xiaotian's son. Your talent is not inferior to Xiaotian's back then. In a sense, you are much more outstanding than Xiaotian. Uncle is quite pleased to see you so outstanding. Glen Haohai suddenly said with a pleasant expression. Glen Haohai's attitude immediately confused Glen Narcissus and the other three. Glen Haohai's usual style was not like this. When had he ever treated others with such a pleasant expression? Zhuowen nodded and said with a relaxed expression. Then you can tell me about my father, right? Unexpectedly, Glen Haohai shook his head and said, Actually, I am not sure about your father's disappearance. It is useless for you to ask me. You don't know either? Zhuowen frowned slightly, but sneered in his heart. This Glen Haohai must be lying. Back then, Zhuo Xiaotian went to the imperial capital with him. And Zhuo Xiaotian also went missing in the imperial capital. He did not believe that Glen Haohai did not know why Zhuo Xiaotian went missing. It was just that Zhuowen did not know why Glen Haohai was lying. I am also extremely sorry about your father's disappearance. But now that uncle sees how outstanding you are, if Xiaotian knew, he should be extremely pleased. Zhuowen, back then, your father was extremely talented, a monstrous genius, and even awakened a unique dragon soul. As his son, you should have also inherited his intact bloodline, and probably also awakened a dragon soul. This dragon soul is extremely powerful. I don't know if it is convenient for you to reveal it. Speaking of the dragon soul, Glen Haohai's expression became even more amiable, and his attitude was also extremely gentle. giving people a very good impression. However, Zhuowen felt a chill in his heart. This Glen Haohai actually knew about the dragon soul, and Glen Haohai's attitude at this time made Zhuowen faintly feel that something was wrong. This Glen Haohai seemed to be very eager to know whether he had a dragon soul or not. Sorry, I don't have a dragon soul. I'm afraid I have to disappoint you. Out of caution, Zhuowen still did not intend to reveal the existence of Xiaohei. Although this Glen Haohai's attitude was very good, and he was also a good brother of his father, the style of the Glen family made him faintly disgusted, so it was impossible for him to reveal the existence of Xiaohei to Glen Haohai, who was meeting for the first time. I see. That's really a pity. If you had a dragon soul, I'm afraid your future would really be limitless. Glen Haohai sighed and shook his head regretfully. Boom. Chapter 621. Yu Ding. Useless armor. A strong sense of foreboding suddenly surged in Zhuowen's heart. Then, he was shocked to find that Grant Haohai, who was shaking his head and sighing, had teleported above him. Boom! Grandpa Haohai grabbed at the air, and Zhuowen was unable to resist at all. Grandpa Haohai's terrifying pressure acted on Zhuowen, causing him to be unable to move. He could only allow Grandpa Haohai to grab him. Then, Grant Haohai's right hand formed a sword and pointed at Zhuowen's forehead. Zhuowen only felt a chill on his forehead. Then, he felt a dark blue energy enter his sea of consciousness through Grant Haohai's fingertip. Grant Narcissus and the other three were also stunned by Grant Haohai's sudden action. However, the corners of their mouths curled up, and there was a hint of mockery in their eyes. Grant Haohai, what are you doing? How dare you touch Zhuowen? He's Xiaoyan's son. A loud shout suddenly came from the end of the open space. There were many members of the Zhuo family standing at the end of the open space. The head of the family, Zhuo Xiangding, was standing at the head of the group. When they saw Zhuowen being held in Grant Haohai's hand, they all revealed looks of anger. Zhuo Xiangding even shouted loudly, "Oh, so it's Uncle Xiangding. Long time no see. Looks like you're still quite healthy." Grant Haohai's face was still calm. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. He still had time to talk to Zhuo Xiangding while holding Zhuowen in one hand. Whoosh! Zhuo Xiangding's hair and beard flared up in anger as he glared at Grant Haohai and roared. I said, let go of Zhuowen. What are you going to do to him? Uncle, don't worry. Zhuowen is Xiaoyan's son. As Xiaoyan's good brother, I won't do anything to harm him. You should just stay aside. Grant Haohai smiled faintly and flicked his finger. A blue light shot out from his fingertip and turned into a blue barrier in front of Zhuo Xiangding. No matter how Zhuo Xiangding attacked, he couldn't break the blue barrier. At this moment, Zhuowen, who was held in Grant Haohai's hand, frowned slightly. He was trying his best to resist the dark blue energy that invaded his sea of consciousness from Grant Haohai's fingertip. In the sea of consciousness, there was a chaotic darkness. In this chaotic darkness, a wisp of dark blue energy, like an arrow, was constantly moving forward in the darkness, trying to enter the deepest part of the sea of consciousness. In the depths of his sea of consciousness, Xiaohei had turned into an oval-shaped black fog and fell into a deep sleep. Aside from Xiaohei, there was also the broken jade tripod floating quietly in the center. Block it! Zhuowen screamed madly in his heart. Hundreds of level 4 advanced mental strength in his mud-pill palace flew toward the strange blue energy like huge dragons. Crack! 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 A strange sound was heard. Zhuowen was shocked to find that the dark blue energy was extremely tough. The hundreds of mind powers in front of it were all shattered like tofu. Poochie! Zhuowen couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He looked ferocious. He has rank 4 advanced mind powers. In the outside world, Grant Haohai was controlling the blue energy, intending to enter the deepest part of Zhuo Wen's sea of consciousness. He did not expect Zhuo Wen to have rank 4 advanced spiritual power, and hundreds of them appeared at once. It was so terrifying. What an outstanding young man. He's not even 20 years old, but he's already at the peak of the ultimate emperor stage, and a rank 4 advanced arcanist. Grant Haohai's eyelids twitched. Zhuowen's talent was beginning to move him. If Zhuowen was only at the peak of the ultimate emperor stage, he wouldn't be so surprised. However, other than his martial achievements, Zhuowen's mind powers had also reached the rank 4 advanced arcanist level. This was a little terrifying. Grant Howhai didn't try to hide his voice. Grant Daffodil and the other 3 heard him. They looked at each other with shock on their faces. The fact that Zhuowen had reached the pinnacle of the ultimate 5-wheel emperor realm at such a young age had already shocked them. However, they had never imagined that Zhuowen was also a level 4 great accomplishment arcana master. This kid was a little too terrifying. Everyone knew that the cultivation of mind powers was much more difficult than martial arts. It was already a genius to be able to cultivate to a rank 3 arcanist before the age of 20. However, this kid in front of them had actually reached the rank 4 advanced arcanist level. It was too terrifying. We have all underestimated how terrifying this kid is. Although his martial skills aren't as good as Mrs. with his terrifying mind powers, he is qualified to be with Mrs. Eldersher sighed softly. Grant Daffodil frowned slightly. The talent that Zhuowen had displayed made even her feel ashamed. However, when she heard Eldersher praise Zhuowen in such a way, she was instinctively unhappy. She snorted coldly and said, "So what if he is talented in mind powers? This kid's background is too lowly. He is still not worthy of Sister Baiha and our Grant family." Eldersher heard this and didn't refute. Although Grant Daffodil's words had a personal grudge, she wasn't wrong. Grant Baiha was the proud daughter of the Grant family. Her temperament and outlook were far superior to ordinary people. If one wasn't a monstrous genius, he wouldn't be able to catch her eye. In Grant Baiha's eyes, only the top 5 on the Green Emperor list could catch her eye. As for the other geniuses, she simply didn't care about them, as she had never paid much attention to geniuses who were weaker than her. Furthermore, it was said that the second prince of the royal family had once vaguely expressed his love for Grant Baiha. The second prince was also in the top 10 of the Green Emperor list, but he was ranked below Grant Baiha. Although the second prince was of noble status and had a lofty status, it wouldn't be a problem for him to be with Grant Baiha. However, Grant Baiha had rejected him directly because the second prince was weaker than her. In Grant Baiha's opinion, only powerhouses whose status and strength were above hers had the right to get close to her. Everyone else was like grass to her. Although Zhuowen's talent was extremely strong, and his mind powers weren't weak, his overall strength wasn't weak compared to the top 10 on the Green Emperor list. Therefore, Eldersher didn't think that Grant Baiha would be interested in Zhuowen. At the moment, Grant Howhai had a focused expression on his face as he controlled the blue energy to break through the obstruction of countless mind powers and enter the deepest part of his consciousness. "I'm finally in," Grant Howhai said with a smile. At the moment, Zhuowen's face was extremely gloomy. How could he not know what Grant Howhai was trying to do? This person actually wanted to forcefully explore his consciousness and identify the armor spirit in his body. This action was extremely dangerous. If he wasn't careful, Zhuowen's consciousness might be messed up, and he might become an idiot. I must not let him find out about Xiao Hei's existence. Zhuowen was extremely nervous. He knew that Grant Howhai had mentioned the dragon spirit, and it probably wasn't a good thing. If he found out about Xiao Hei's existence, who knew what would happen? Swoosh! As soon as the blue energy entered the center of the consciousness, it headed straight for the sleeping Xiao Hei. This scene made Zhuowen shudder with fear. Just as the blue energy was about to approach Xiao Hei, the broken jade cauldron not far away suddenly buzzed and blocked in front of Xiao Hei. Suddenly, the blue energy was like maggots in a tarsal bone and dyed the jade cauldron blue. A blue light flashed, and the jade cauldron drilled out of Zhuowen's glabella. Then, a huge broken jade cauldron appeared in the air above him. It's actually not a dragon spirit. What kind of armor spirit is this broken jade cauldron? Looking at the jade cauldron that appeared above Zhuowen, Grant Howhai was astonished. He could clearly feel that the broken jade cauldron armor spirit that was extracted from Zhuowen's consciousness was extremely weak. It was most likely a useless armor spirit. His martial talent is so high, but I didn't expect him to have a useless armor spirit. Grant Howhai narrowed his eyes and revealed a mocking smile. Originally, The terrifying talent that Zhuowen had displayed earlier had already caused a trace of coldness to rise in his heart. However, after seeing Zhuowen's broken jade cauldron armor soul, this trace of coldness disappeared. Before reaching the Four Reverends realm, the armor spirit was not very useful to a martial artist. Because it was a spirit body, its help to a martial artist was extremely limited. However, after a martial artist reached the Four Reverends realm, the armor spirit would transform from a spirit body into a physical entity and have the possibility of materialization. At that time, the armor spirit would unleash extremely terrifying power. The stronger the armor spirit of a martial artist, the more powerful his soul power would be. When he reached the Four Reverends realm, his strength would become extremely terrifying. Among the many armor spirits, the strongest was undoubtedly the dragon spirit. Dragons were a race above all things. A martial artist who had a dragon spirit might not be much different from an ordinary martial artist before reaching the Four Reverends realm. However, once one reached the Four Reverends realm and the dragon spirit materialized, a martial artist could rely on the dragon spirit to become invincible among those of the same rank. He could even challenge a Four Reverends realm expert of a higher rank. After a martial artist reached the Four Reverends realm, it was not that easy to kill him. It was even more impossible to challenge someone of a higher rank. However, a martial artist with a powerful armor spirit had the possibility of doing so. It was common for a martial artist with a dragon spirit to challenge someone of a higher rank. Originally, Grant Hauhai thought that Zhuowen might have the legendary dragon spirit. After all, he was the son of Zhuo Xiaotian, the son of the terrifying guy who had awakened the dragon spirit. However, now it seemed that Grant Hauhai's concerns were unnecessary. Not only did Zhuowen not have a dragon spirit, the armor spirit he had was a useless armor spirit. Grant Hauhai could completely imagine that if Zhuowen's cultivation reached the Four Reverends realm, he would probably become the weakest Four Reverends realm martial artist in history. Useless armor spirit? Grant Narcissus and the other three were stunned. The pressure that Zhuowen gave them just now was too great. Originally, they thought that even if Zhuowen did not have a dragon spirit, the armor spirit in his body would not be too weak. However, what appeared in front of them was actually a useless armor spirit. It's just a piece of trash with a useless armor spirit. It's even more impossible for him to be worthy of Sister Baiha. If this guy wants to be a toad lusting after a swan's meat, that's simply a fool's dream. He's just a piece of trash. Grant Narcissus sneered coldly. The corners of Qin Mu and Mu Lin's mouths curled up in a mocking smile, completely unbridled. Chapter 622. Gran Hauhai's killing intent. The mocking smile on Gran Hauhai's face became even more intense. He waved his right hand, and the blue energy on the surface of the jade cauldron buzzed and retreated back into his body. Without the imprisonment of the blue energy, the jade cauldron armored spirit went back into Zhuowen's forehead. Zhuowen's eyes regained their clarity. Whoosh! As soon as he regained his clarity, the three pairs of lightning wings on his back unfolded. Zhuowen turned into lightning and retreated dozens of meters away. He stared at Gran Hauhai, who was still smiling in front of him. Gran Hauhai was extremely shrewd and had a knife hidden in his smile. Zhuowen was extremely fearful and disgusted with such a person. He really did not know why he became good brothers with his father. Moreover, Grand Hauhai had secretly probed his sea of consciousness without giving him the slightest bit of respect. This made Zhuowen extremely angry. If Grand Hauhai had even the slightest bit of killing intent, Zhuowen would have died on the spot. At this moment, the blue barrier in front of Zhuo Xiangding had been removed. In a flash, Zhuo Xiangding came to Zhuowen's side and asked worriedly, "Zhuowen, are you okay?" Zhuowen did not speak. He only shook his head and stared sharply at Gran Hauhai in front of him. "Gran Hauhai, what do you mean? As Zhuowen's elder, why did you attack Zhuowen?" Seeing that Zhuowen was fine, Zhuo Xiangding heaved a sigh of relief and asked Gran Hauhai angrily, "Uncle, you are blaming the wrong person. As you can see, I did not hurt Zhuowen. I only checked his body." Gran Hauhai smiled faintly. Zhuo Xiangding's pupil shrank. Gran Hohai was really shameless. He checked Zhuowen's sea of consciousness without permission, and said it in such a dignified manner. Zhuowen's expression became increasingly gloomy. It was obvious that Grant Hauhai did not come with good intentions. Although the smile on his face was extremely warm, his actions were extremely overbearing. Zhuowen reached out to stop Zhuo Xiangding and said indifferently, "Forget it. Grandpa, we don't have to bother with this kind of person. Since Grand Family Head has appeared today, I, Zhuowen, will give you face and take them away." Haha. Nephew Zhuo seems to have forgotten something, right? You haven't handed over the marriage certificate yet. Grand Haohai's eyes flickered as he smiled faintly. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, and a cold smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. He took out the yellowed marriage contract from his bosom and opened it. He pointed at the fingerprint below and said, "If I remember correctly, Patriarch Grand also left his fingerprint on this marriage contract, right? Since the fingerprint has been imprinted, I don't think the Grand Family Patriarch is a treacherous villain, right?" As soon as these words came out, Gran Hohai's skin trembled. The smile on his face faded as he stared at Zhuowen and said, "Haha, Nephew Zhuo, do you mean that you plan to marry into our grand family? If Nephew Zhuo has such intentions, I am willing to fulfill your wish." Zhuowen's words were reasonable. No matter how Gran Hohai quibbled, he had to admit that he did have a part of this marriage certificate. "Marry into our family?" Zhuowen sneered again and again, but shook his head and said, "I know my place. Your grand family is one of the 5 great families in the imperial city, and my Zhuo family is only a small family in a low-level city. This marriage is not suitable. Actually, I am also against it." Hearing this, Gran Hohai revealed a smile. In his heart, he secretly praised Zhuowen for being sensible. However, Zhuowen's next words caused his face to darken. "I will directly divorce Grand Lily. This way, the Grand Family and the Zhuo family will have nothing to do with each other. Isn't this in line with the Grand Family Head's wishes?" At the end, Zhuowen emphasized the word "you." "Divorce? Zhuowen, are you sure?" Gran Hohai's gaze hardened, his voice finally becoming much colder. This Zhuowen actually dared to boast so shamelessly, daring to divorce the Grand Lily of their grand family. If they really accepted Zhuowen's divorce letter, their grand family would undoubtedly become a laughing stock. "Zhuowen, I've already been polite enough to you. Now you only have 2 choices. Either hand over the marriage certificate, or your Zhuo family will be destroyed. I think this old man still has the qualifications to destroy your Zhuo family." Finally, Grand Haohai no longer had a pleasant expression, and his voice became extremely cold. He would absolutely not accept the letter of divorce. Moreover, in his eyes, Zhuo and the Zhuo family were insignificant like ants. He didn't put them in his eyes at all. Since Zhuowen didn't know what was good for him, he didn't plan to pretend anymore. He directly shed all pretense of cordiality and began to threaten Zhuowen. "You're really shameless. You clearly just called me your nephew, but now you're threatening to destroy my Zhuo family. I'd like to ask you, Grand Family Head, how thick is your skin?" Zhuowen shook his head, the corners of his mouth filled with a mocking smile. Since Gran Hohai had shed all pretense of cordiality, Zhuowen no longer had any scruples when speaking. His voice was as cold as ice in the 12th lunar month. Good. Zhuowen, you're the one who forced me to do this. Originally, I didn't want to bicker with you too much because your Zhuo family and the Grand Family used to be aristocratic families. Unfortunately, not only do you not know what's good for you, but you're also full of vulgarities. Today, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of Xiaotian." Grand Haohai's expression was dark and cold. With a stomp of his foot, a terrifying aura instantly gushed out. Immediately, the entire empty ground seemed to have frozen. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan under this aura, and actually knelt on the ground with one knee, a sinister expression on his face. "I'll ask you one more time. Will you hand over the marriage certificate or not?" Gran Hohai's voice carried a trace of coldness that chilled people to the bone. "Haha, do you think that just because our Zhuo family is weaker than your grand family, we must be bullied by you? Must we listen to your orders and do whatever you want? Although our Zhuo family is weak, at least we have a backbone. We won't hand over the marriage certificate. Zhuowen faced the sky and laughed loudly. His laughter was unrestrained, crazy and unrestrained. Why did Zhuowen have to yield? Why did he have to compromise? If he compromised on everything, then the Grand family would be even more insatiable. You won't hand it over? Then you'll die. Grand Haohai let out a sinister laugh. He took a step forward and instantly arrived above Zhuowen. His right palm pressed down, transforming into a several hundred feet large transparent palm print in the air, and fiercely bombarded Zhuowen. Feeling the terrifying palm print in the sky, Zhuowen was almost unable to move. This palm print was too terrifying. Just the power that flowed out was like a 10,000-foot tall mountain, pressing down on him, making him unable to stand. Looks like I can only ask Big Brother Hantian to come and help. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. In the end, he still took out the teleportation talisman from his bosom and crushed it without hesitation. Instantly, a terrifying blood light soared into the sky. Above the void, a crack suddenly appeared, and a sloppy figure instantly appeared. The moment this sloppy figure appeared, he immediately struck out with his palm. The palm print in the void shattered into pieces like glass. Teleportation talisman? This Zhuowen also has a teleportation talisman? With the palm print broken, Gran Haohai's pupils shrank and he retreated. He looked at the figure that stepped out of the blood pillar with fear. This person was definitely a strong opponent. He could not be careless. He's actually a 4th Paragon Realm expert. How can this Zhuowen know a 4th Paragon Realm expert? Gran Haohai's beautiful face had a hint of disbelief. Those who could give out a teleportation talisman were basically close people. For this person to be able to give it to Zhuowen, it was obvious that this person's relationship with Zhuowen was not ordinary. So what if this person is a 4th Paragon Realm expert? Father is a Heavenly Paragon Realm expert. This person is definitely not a match for Father. Thinking of Gran Haohai's strength, the sneer on Gran Haohai's face became even wider. She did not believe that this expert that Zhuowen found would be stronger than her father. The blood pillar dissipated. A sloppy old beggar in ragged clothes suddenly stepped out. This person first struck a few poses in the air that he thought were handsome. Then he slowly walked to Zhuowen's side. Zhuowen, what's wrong? Did someone bully you? This person was Lu Hantian. At this moment, Lu Hantian casually walked to Zhuowen's side. With a wave of his sleeve, Gran Haohai's terrifying aura instantly collapsed. Gran Haohai's pupils shrank again. This sloppy beggar's strength was probably above his expectations. He actually broke his aura so easily. Haha, this is a matter between our Gran Haohai family and the Zhuo family. This matter has nothing to do with you. After thinking for a moment, Gran Haohai's face recovered a warm smile. He cupped his hands slightly, and his attitude was rather polite. He could feel the threatening feeling from this person, so he did not want to offend too much. Oh, so you're the Gran Haohai patriarch of the Gran Haohai family. Lu Hantian raised his eyebrows and chuckled. That's me. It's best that you don't interfere in this matter. After all, our Gran Haohai family is still quite powerful in the imperial capital county. It's not a wise move for you to lose the big picture for a small gain. Gran Haohai's face revealed a trace of pride, although he felt a threatening feeling from this person. After hearing of his Gran Haohai family's name, this person should still give their Gran Haohai family face. Haha, who do you think you are? Losing the big picture for a small gain? You actually dare to threaten me. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? You'd better get lost as far as possible. Otherwise, I'll beat you up until your mother can't recognize you. Lu Hantian crossed his arms and sneered. Suddenly, the smile on Gran Haohai family's face froze. He did not expect that the beggar man in front of him would be so unrestrained and unruly. I really admire your ability. You clearly know that we're from the Gran Haohai family, but you still dare to be so presumptuous. Since you don't want to take the road to heaven, then don't blame me for being impolite. Gran Haohai's face darkened. He suddenly took a step forward and swept towards Lu Hantian. This Lu Hantian's mouth was too despicable. Even though Gran Haohai was a scheming person, he could not help but be angry. He must teach Lu Hantian a lesson. Haha, an initial heavenly venerate dares to teach me a lesson. Today, I'll beat you up until your mother can't recognize you. Lu Hantian was not afraid. He also took a step forward. Terrifying spear and tent revolved around his body and turned into a ray of flowing light. Rumble. Chapter 623. Saint Heart Elixir. Dang dang dang. Heavy footsteps sounded continuously in the void. A figure retreated in a sorry state and only stabilized himself after a few hundred meters away. Glenn, Narcissus, and the other three looked at him, and their faces were instantly filled with shock. The one who retreated awkwardly was Glenn Howhai. The sloppy old beggar straightened his back and stood still in the void. How is this possible? How can this old beggar be so powerful? Even Lord Father has to retreat? Glenn Narcissus' beautiful eyes widened as a trace of disbelief appeared on her pretty face. The current battle situation was extremely obvious. The sloppy old beggar was clearly stronger than Grant Howhai, and by quite a bit. What's going on with Zhuowen? How can he know such a terrifying expert? Elder Shi took a deep breath and muttered to himself. On the other hand, Qin Mu and Mulin kept quiet out of fear. They didn't dare to say even half a word now. This Zhuowen had really exceeded their expectations time and time again. He was actually able to invite such a strong expert. Even Grand Howhai had to retreat. Who are you? Glenn Howhai stabilized himself and asked with a gloomy face. Lu Hantian of the House of Marquis Qin. Lu Hantian sneered. Lu Hantian? Hearing this, Grand Howhai's pupils constricted to the extreme. Although Grand Howhai rarely paid attention to the affairs of other counties, as a force of the imperial capital county, he had heard a little about the sensational event that happened in Muqin Marquis Mansion 2 months ago. One of the 5 super forces in Muqin County, Marquis House of Baichuan, was destroyed by the House of Marquis Qin. Of course, a force like Marquis House of Baichuan was like an ant to the Glenn family. It was not worth mentioning. However, Glenn Howhai knew that there was an ancestor hidden in Marquis House of Baichuan. His name was Su Lingtian, and he was also an initial heavenly master. However, 2 months ago, he had heard that not only had the 100 Rivers Marquis Mansion been destroyed, but the patriarch of the 100 Rivers Marquis Mansion, Su Lingtian, had lost an arm and had to use the blood escape art to escape. The one who had made Su Lingtian so miserable was none other than Lu Hantian. After learning that this person was Lu Hantian, Grand Howhai's face twitched. He could only force a smile and said, "So it's Brother Lu. Zhuowen is my brother. Why do you want to touch him?" Lu Hantian said coldly. Grand Howhai's eyelids twitched, and he said helplessly, "It's a long story. I came here this time merely to take back the marriage contract from all those years ago. Unfortunately, Nephew Zhua has a stubborn character and just refused to give it to me. So I could only seize it." Marriage certificate? So your grand family and the Zhua family actually have an engagement. I heard that the grand lily of your grand family is a proud daughter of the heavens. She's even ranked in the top 10 of the Azure Emperor leaderboard. She's barely worthy of my brother Zhuowen. Also, are you blind? I'm handsome and charming. Although my brother Zhuowen is slightly inferior to me in terms of looks, he's still a first-class handsome man. Marrying your daughter is an honor for your grand family. You actually came here to take back the marriage certificate? Are you sick in the head or something? Lu Hantian said casually. When he said those words, Grand Howhai almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Lu Hantian actually said that Grand Lily was barely worthy of Zhuowen. Moreover, this guy actually had the face to say that he was a handsome man. What kind of narcissism did he need to have to imagine himself as a handsome man? Although Lu Hantian looked like he was asking for a beating, Grand Howhai didn't dare to make a move. This Lu Hantian was too terrifying. He really didn't want to risk his life against such a person. Zhuowen, you're the main character in this matter. You make the decision. That Grand Lily is not bad. You won't lose out by marrying that girl. Suddenly, Lu Hantian winked at Zhuowen and said. Zhuowen smiled bitterly and shrugged. Since the other party has no intention of this marriage, I, Zhuowen, am not a shameless person. Naturally, I won't try to get a cold shoulder. As long as the Grand Family's patriarch accepts this divorce certificate, our Zhua family and your Grand Family will be considered even in the future. Divorce certificate? Haha, Zhuowen, you really have a personality. No matter what, this Grand Lily is still a famous beauty in the imperial city. Moreover, she's the Grand family's proud daughter. It's said that her reputation in the imperial city isn't small. You're actually divorcing her like this? Don't you feel that it's a pity? Lu Hantian was stunned at first, but soon after, he burst into laughter. He gave Zhuowen a thumbs up with an expression that said, "You're awesome. It's not a pity. We've never met, so how can we talk about feelings? A cold marriage certificate is really hard for me to feel the slightest bit of meaning. Moreover, the Grand family is high up. Our Zhuo family can't match up to them." Speaking up to here, Zhuowen looked meaningfully at Grand Haohai, who was not far away, whose expression was gradually becoming gloomy. That's true. No matter how beautiful a flower is, if it has thorns, it may not be a good thing. Lu Hantian nodded. As he spoke, Lu Hantian pointed at Grand Haohai and said casually, "Grand Haohai, you heard it too. My brother said that your Grand Lily is not worthy of him. So he wants to divorce her. You won't have any objections, right? Divorce certificate? Not worthy." The more Grand Haohai heard, the angrier he became. He said coldly, "If I accept this divorce certificate, then where will our Grand family's face go?" Lu Hantian, don't think that just because you're strong enough, you can take me down. My Grand family was able to become one of the 5 major families not by chance. Speaking up to here, Grand Haohai shook his sleeve, and a strange fruit that was constantly beating appeared in his palm. It was like a heartbeat, thumping nonstop. Saint Heart Elixir Fruit? Looking at the strange fruit in Grand Haohai's palm, Lu Hantian's face twitched, and he could not help but exclaim. Even Zhuowen's pupil shrank. Although he was not old, with the existence of Xiaohei, his experience was far beyond his peers. He naturally knew about the Saint Heart Elixir Fruit. The Saint Heart Elixir Fruit was a 7th-grade spirit medicine. It was said that after consuming it, it could instantly enhance a cultivator's potential and exert strength far beyond their own. Grand Haohai was originally in the early stage of the heavenly venerable realm. If he consumed the Saint Heart Elixir Fruit, it would be extremely difficult for even Lu Hantian to deal with Grand Haohai. As expected of one of the 7 major forces of the imperial city, the Grand family's background is indeed extraordinary. It is much more terrifying than the house of Marquis Qin. Narrowing his eyes, Zhuowen was quite surprised. The Grand family's background was indeed terrifying. They even had a 7th-grade spirit medicine like the Saint Heart Elixir Fruit. It was unlikely that the house of Marquis Qin could take out such a spirit medicine. Lu Hantian, I only want the marriage certificate. Once I get the marriage certificate, the Grand family and the Zhuo family will be even. At that time, I will leave. This condition is not too much, right? Grand Haohai was a little nervous at this moment. The Saint Heart Elixir Fruit was the only one in the Grand family. Once it was used, it would be gone. In fact, he did not want to use it like this. Lu Hantian frowned slightly, took a step forward, and said coldly, "Use it if you have the guts. I will accompany you to the end." "That's what you said." Grand Haohai's voice was cold and his eyes were gloomy. The atmosphere suddenly became more serious. Just as the two of them were about to fight, Zhuowen slowly walked in between the two of them. His clear voice slowly rang out. "Patriarch Grand, why don't we make a bet? How about it?" Zhuowen's arrival immediately eased the tension between Lu Hantian and Grand Haohai. Grand Haohai sighed and said coldly, "Bet? You can say it. Don't try your luck. The Grand family must get the marriage certificate back." The corner of Zhuowen's mouth slightly curled, and he said indifferently, "The War of the 9 Counties will be in 2 months. This War of the 9 Counties will also be the ranking battle of the Green Emperor leaderboard. This time, if I, Zhuowen, can surpass the Grand Lily, then your Grand family will have to accept my divorce certificate. On the other hand, if I can't surpass her, I will hand over the marriage certificate with both hands. How about it? Patriarch Grand, do you dare to bet?" At this point, Zhuowen straightened his back and his eyes shone like stars. When Grand Haohai heard this, he raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Haha, newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. Lily's strength is far above yours. You actually want to challenge her. You are simply courting death. Patriarch Grand, I'm asking you if you dare to bet? I don't want to listen to your nonsense. Zhuowen's eyes were cold as he said coldly. Grand Haohai was stunned. He snorted and said, Since you want to bet, I will bet with you. If you lose the Green Emperor leaderboard this time, you must hand over the marriage certificate. Of course, if I win this time, I will also bring the divorce letter and personally go to your Glen family. Zhuowen nodded and said, pretending to be serious. Humph, you are quite confident. However, your confidence is just an illusion to me. Let's go. In the end, Grand Haohai did not dare to use the Saint Heart Elixir to fight with Lu Hantian. The Saint Heart Elixir was too important. He was not willing to use it at all. After speaking, Grand Haohai brought Grand Shuixian and the other three and broke through the sky, instantly disappearing into the horizon. Zhuowen, are you afraid that I can't win against this Grand Haohai? When Grand Haohai and the others left, Lu Hantian frowned and said, how could he not see through Zhuowen's actions? He was obviously worried that Grand Haohai would become too strong after consuming the Saint Heart Elixir, which would be disadvantageous to him. However, Zhuowen shook his head and said, Big brother Hantian, there's absolutely no need for you to fight to the death with Grand Haohai over the matter of the marriage contract. It's simply not worth it. I, Zhuowen, will personally settle this debt. Hearing this, Lu Hantian looked at Zhuowen with deep meaning. He patted Zhuowen's shoulder and suddenly said solemnly, You have backbone. However, you still have to be careful. That Grand Lily is not easy to deal with. Its strength is even stronger than Guosheng. Zhuowen's pupil shrank. This Grand Lily was indeed not easy to deal with. It was even stronger than Guosheng. Zhuowen had experienced how terrifying Guosheng was. This Grand Lily was even stronger than Guosheng. Zhuowen immediately felt his heart sink. However, you don't have to worry too much. Your talent is not inferior to that Grand Lily. The process of the 9 counties war will take a lot of time. You still have a chance to catch up to that Grand Lily. Lu Hantian said with a smile. Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he noticed that Lu Hantian's eyes were flickering, as if there was something difficult to say. He asked curiously, Big brother Hantian, what's wrong? Do you have something to say? Sighing lightly, Lu Hantian said hesitantly, Zhuowen, do you have a dragon soul? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.